When we think of history's great civilizations, we often imagine them from a safe distance, admiring their achievements, marveling at their art, and romanticizing their way of life. But what if you had to actually live in these societies, follow their rules, and survive by their standards? The truth is, most of us wouldn't last a week. Tonight we venture into 5 extraordinary worlds, where survival demanded not just physical endurance, but complete mastery of complex social codes, spiritual beliefs, and specialized skills that took lifetimes to perfect. These aren't just historical curiosities, they're immersive experiences that reveal how radically different human societies can be from our own. Blood, ice, and honor. Life as a Viking warrior farmer. Forget everything you think you know about Vikings. Throw out the horned helmets, they never wore them, the barbaric savagery. They were cleaner than most medieval Europeans, and the image of mindless berserkers. They were skilled diplomats and traders. The reality of Viking life was far more complex, demanding, and brutal than any Hollywood depiction could capture. You wake up in 9th century Norway. Outside your wooden longhouse, snow falls heavily, adding to drifts that already reach your windows. The temperature inside barely rises above freezing, despite the fire that never fully dies in your central hearth. Your breath forms clouds in the air as you roll out of furs that smell of smoked leather and the musk of the animals they once covered. Welcome to Viking Society. You're about to discover why you wouldn't last a month, let alone a lifetime, in this world of farmer warriors who conquered half of Europe while battling the harshest climate on Earth. Your first challenge isn't sword-wielding enemies or stormy seas, it's simply surviving another Scandinavian winter. Modern people with heated homes, insulated walls, and reliable food supplies can barely comprehend what winter meant to a Viking farmer living at 60 degrees north latitude. The darkness comes first. By December, you're lucky to see 4 hours of weak sunlight per day. For most practical purposes, you live in perpetual twilight, punctuated by brief grey interludes that pass for day. The psychological impact is crushing. Modern researchers know this as seasonal affective disorder, but you just know it as the long darkness that makes strong men weep and drives others to violence or madness. Your house is built for survival, not comfort. The walls are thick timber planks sealed with mud moss and whatever else you can find to keep out the wind. The roof is layers of sod and bark that provide insulation but also leak constantly during thaws, creating a perpetually damp environment that breeds disease and decay. Heat comes from a central stone hearth that burns continuously from September to May. Running out of firewood doesn't just mean discomfort, it means death. You spent most of the previous summer cutting, hauling, and stacking wood, but it's never enough. You burn everything combustible: wood dung bones, even excess furniture when supplies run low. Food preservation is a constant battle against spoilage and scarcity. You've salted, smoked, dried, and buried every scrap of food you could gather during the brief growing season. Meat hangs from rafters, slowly mummifying in the smoke from your fire. Fish packed in salt barrels line your walls. Root vegetables buried in sand under your floor provide vitamins that prevent scurvy. But it's never enough. By February, you're down to the last preserved fish, the weakest livestock are dying, and you're supplementing your diet with whatever you can find: bark bread, seaweed, even grass soup. Spring feels impossible, and many winters it is. Archaeological evidence suggests that up to 20% of Scandinavian populations died during particularly harsh winters. Your clothing is your armor against the cold. Layer upon layer of wool, linen, and leather topped with furs from the animals you've trapped or hunted. You haven't truly washed your clothes in months. Soap is a luxury and hot water requires precious fuel. Instead, you brush off dirt and rotate clothes to air them out. You smell, but so does everyone else. Sleep brings little rest. You share your bed with family members using combined body heat to stay warm. Fleas and lice are constant companions, as are the sounds of animals you keep indoors. Chickens, goats, sometimes even cattle share your living space during the worst weather. Privacy doesn't exist. Families of 10 or 12 people live in houses smaller than a modern apartment. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Frostbite claims fingers and toes regularly. Hypothermia kills the unwary. Houses burn down when desperate inhabitants take risks with fire. The only thing worse than being cold inside your house is being caught outside during a blizzard, which guarantees death within hours. Yet this is just the baseline existence of Viking life. Winter doesn't excuse you from other responsibilities. Livestock must be tended, tools repaired, stories told to preserve cultural knowledge and plans made for the coming year. The strong survive winter. The weak become tales of caution for the next generation. When spring finally arrives, you don't get to rest. You get to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Being a Viking farmer isn't just about growing enough food to survive. It's about producing enough surplus to support warriors during raiding season, to trade for luxury goods, and to store against future famines. The growing season in Scandinavia is brutally short. You might have 120 frost-free days if you're lucky. Every one of those days must be maximised, which means working from dawn until dark in a desperate race against time. There are no weekends, no vacations, no sick days. Your primary crops are barley, rye and oats, hardy grains that can mature in short seasons but require constant attention. You plant in fields carved from forests with back-breaking labour clearing stones, pulling stumps and fighting the soil's natural tendency to revert to wilderness. Ploughing is done with a simple wooden ard pulled by oxen if you're prosperous, by humans if you're not. The ploughing, seeding, weeding and harvesting must all be done by hand or with simple tools. A family of 6 might work 20 acres, far less than would be needed for comfortable living, but all they can manage with available technology. You're constantly gambling against weather. Too much rain rots the seeds. Too little rain stunts growth. Late frost kills sprouting plants. Early frost destroys the harvest. Storms flatten grain just before harvest. Insects, diseases and birds take their toll. Perhaps 1 year in 4 gives you anything approaching a good harvest. Livestock provide protein, milk and materials for clothing and tools. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs and chickens all require different care, feed and shelter. You must know the signs of animal diseases, the timing of breeding cycles and the skills needed for butchering, skinning and preserving meat. Women's work is equally demanding, though different in nature. They manage the household process and preserve food, spin, thread, weave, cloth, brew, ale, make cheese and butter, gather wild plants for food and medicine, and raise children, all while being ready to defend the farm when men are away raiding. Children start working as soon as they can walk. By age 5, they're watching geese gathering eggs and helping with simple tasks. By 10, boys are learning to handle weapons and ships, while girls master the complex skills of running a household. There's no concept of childhood as a protected time of play and learning. Every Viking farmer is also a craftsperson. You must know how to repair tools, build furniture, make rope tan hides, forge simple iron implements and construct buildings. Self-sufficiency isn't an ideal. It's the only way to survive when the nearest neighbour might be miles away and the nearest town weeks of travel. The work isn't just physical but mental. You must remember the complex relationships between families, the obligations of honour and hospitality, the cycles of plants and animals, the signs that predict weather, and the stories that preserve your culture's knowledge. But perhaps the greatest burden of being a Viking farmer is knowing that all your work might be undone by forces beyond your control. A raid by enemies could burn your fields and steal your livestock. A harsh winter could kill your animals and spoil your stores. Disease could fell your family. Bad weather could destroy your crops. Every day is a struggle against entropy, against the natural tendency of things to fall apart, decay, and die. Success isn't measured by comfort or happiness, but by simple survival, making it through another winter. Seeing your children grow to adulthood, leaving something for the next generation to build upon. Spring means more than farming. It means raiding season. As the ice breaks and the seas become navigable, Viking society transforms from scattered farming communities into a war machine capable of terrorizing Europe. But becoming a Viking raider requires far more than just courage and a willingness to fight. The preparation begins months before the first ship sets sail. Warriors must be equipped, ships must be prepared, and the complex social obligations that hold Viking society together must be navigated. You can't simply decide to go raiding. You must be invited by a leader, prove your worth, and fulfill your obligations to your family and community. Your first challenge is acquiring proper equipment. A Viking warrior's gear represents enormous wealth and effort. Your sword alone might cost the equivalent of several cows, more than most farmers earn in a year. The blade must be perfectly balanced, sharp enough to cleave through bone, and decorated with inlays and runes that mark its quality and spiritual power. But swords are only for the wealthy elite. Most Vikings fight with spears, axes, and knives, weapons that double as farming and crafting tools. Your spear needs a steel point backed by an ash shaft long enough to outreach enemy swords. Your axe must be weighted for both battle and tree felling. Even these simple weapons require considerable investment and skill to craft properly. Armor is equally important and expensive. A proper mail shirt requires thousands of iron rings, each individually forged and linked together, work that takes skilled craftsmen months to complete. Helmets, shields, and arm guards further add to the cost. Most warriors make do with leather armor reinforced with metal studs, but even this represents significant expense. Your shield is perhaps your most important piece of equipment. Made from limewood planks covered with leather and rimmed with iron, it's both offensive and defensive weapon. The shield must be light enough to maneuver quickly, but strong enough to stop spear thrusts and sword cuts. Decorated with painted designs that identify your clan and achievements, it becomes an extension of your identity. Ship preparation requires the entire community's effort. Viking longships are marvels of engineering, shallow-drafted vessels that can navigate both open seas and river systems fast enough to outrun most pursuers, but stable enough to carry dozens of armed men. Each ship requires careful maintenance, caulking seams, replacing worn planks, checking rigging, and waterproofing the hull. But ships need crews and crews need leaders. The social dynamics of forming a raiding party are incredibly complex. Warriors must be recruited based on their skills, their clan relationships, and their personal reputations. Leaders must balance personalities, settle disputes before they begin, and ensure that loot will be divided fairly. Training intensifies as departure approaches. Warriors practice with weapons, rehearse shield wall tactics, and build the trust necessary for combat. You're not just learning to fight individually, but as part of a coordinated unit. Your life depends on the man beside you, and his depends on you. Physical conditioning becomes critical. Raiding requires incredible endurance, rowing for hours in rough seas, marching long distances in armor, fighting hand-to-hand combat while exhausted. The winter's preserved food has left you thinner than ideal, so spring training includes building strength and stamina. Spiritual preparation is equally important. Weapons are blessed with runes invoking Thor's protection or Odin's favor. Seers read omens to determine auspicious times for departure. Warriors make oaths to gods and comrades, binding themselves to codes of honor that will govern their conduct in battle. The psychological transformation from farmer to warrior isn't easy. You must shift from the patient, cautious mindset needed for agriculture to the aggressive, risk-taking attitude required for successful raiding. This mental switch is aided by ale ceremonies and the gradual escalation of violence in training and preparation. Family obligations complicate everything. As a warrior, you want the glory and wealth that successful raiding brings. As a farmer, you know that leaving your fields untended risks disaster for your family. As a father, you understand that you might never return to see your children grow. These competing loyalties create constant internal tension. The moment finally arrives when ice-free seas and prepared ships converge with gathered warriors and favorable omens. The longships slide into the water laden with weapons supplies and men whose faces are painted with the anticipation of violence and the fear of death. Your farming life recedes behind you as you take up oars and set course for lands that will know your strength or your grave. What follows will test every skill you've developed, every alliance you've forged, and every oath you've sworn. The peaceful farmer must become a deadly warrior. The careful steward must become a ruthless raider, and the community member must become part of a brotherhood bonded by shared danger and potential glory. Religion in Viking society isn't a matter of Sunday worship and occasional prayers. It's an all-consuming worldview that shapes every aspect of daily life, from the moment you wake until you fall asleep, from birth until death. The gods aren't distant figures, but active participants in your world, and serving them properly requires understanding a complex system of beliefs, rituals, and obligations that would challenge even the most devout modern believer. Odin the Allfather hangs from the world tree for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear to gain the wisdom of the runes. This isn't just a creation myth, it's a model for the sacrifices required to gain knowledge and power. As a Viking, you're expected to make similar sacrifices, though thankfully not as extreme. Knowledge isn't free, it must be earned through pain, risk, and dedication. Thor, the thunder god, battles giants and monsters to protect Midgard, the realm of humans. But Thor isn't a perfect savior. He's a warrior who sometimes fails, sometimes acts rashly, and ultimately faces his own doom at Ragnarok. This reflects the Viking understanding that even the gods are subject to fate, that victory is temporary, and that courage matters more than success. The Norse pantheon includes dozens of gods and goddesses, each governing different aspects of life. Freya for fertility and prosperity, Frigg for marriage and motherhood, Balder for beauty and fairness, Loki for cunning and change. You must know which gods to invoke for which purposes and how to properly honour each one. Worship often requires sacrifice, not just of animals, but sometimes of valuable possessions or personal comforts. Horses, cattle, and pigs are killed at major festivals, their blood sprinkled on altars and participants. The meat is shared in communal feasts that reinforce social bonds and divine connections. These sacrifices represent genuine economic hardship for farming communities that barely survive from year to year. Human sacrifice, while rare, is not unknown in extreme circumstances. Archaeological evidence suggests that slaves or captives might be killed during the funerals of important leaders or during desperate times when divine intervention is desperately needed. The famous account of Ibn Fadlan describes a Viking funeral where a slave girl volunteers to join her master in death, a ceremony that involves drugs, rape, and murder disguised as religious ritual. The runes aren't just an alphabet, but a magical system that connects the physical and spiritual worlds. Carving runes on weapons imbues them with power. Rune stones mark important events and invoke divine protection. Learning to read and carve runes properly requires years of study and carries significant responsibilities. Misused runes can bring curses upon yourself and your family. Seers and vulva female shamans serve as intermediaries between human and divine realms. These spiritual specialists use various techniques, trance states, herb consumption, ritual tools, to communicate with gods and spirits. Their prophecies guide major decisions about wars, raids, harvests, and marriages. Disregarding their advice risks divine displeasure and supernatural consequences. The concept of fate weird permeates Viking thinking. Your destiny is woven by the Norns at the moment of birth and cannot be escaped, only met with courage and honour. This fatalistic worldview doesn't encourage passivity, but rather acceptance of consequences and determination to face whatever comes with dignity. Death in battle guarantees admission to Valhalla, where fallen warriors feast and fight in preparation for Ragnarok. But this paradise is exclusive. Those who die of disease, age, or accident go to hell, a grey realm of shadows and cold. This belief system creates enormous pressure to seek out violent death rather than peaceful endings. The gods themselves are doomed to die at Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods that will end the current world and begin a new one. This awareness of cosmic impermanence shapes Viking attitudes toward everything from personal relationships to political alliances. If even gods must die, human achievements are necessarily temporary. Seasonal festivals mark the religious calendar and require community participation. Winter solstice, spring equinox, midsummer and harvest festivals each demands specific rituals, foods, and observances. Missing these obligations risks not just personal spiritual consequences, but damage to the entire community's relationship with divine forces. Religious law and secular law intertwine inseparably. Oaths sworn in the name of gods are more binding than simple promises. Breaking such oaths invites both legal punishment and divine retribution. Wedding ceremonies, business contracts, and political alliances all include religious elements that make them spiritually as well as legally binding. The complexity of Norse religion means that being a proper Viking requires constant attention to spiritual obligations. You must remember which gods to honour on which days, what offerings are appropriate for different requests, how to conduct yourself during religious ceremonies, and what taboos must be avoided to prevent supernatural punishment. Modern people often struggle with religious requirements that include weekly attendance and occasional donations. Imagine living in a society where nearly every action has spiritual implications, where the gods actively intervene in daily affairs, and where your eternal fate depends on maintaining proper relationships with dozens of divine beings who make contradictory demands and who themselves face destruction. Law in Viking society doesn't come from distant bureaucrats or written codes imposed by rulers. It emerges from the community itself through institutions like the Thing, assemblies where free men gather to resolve disputes, make decisions, and uphold justice through procedures that would seem utterly foreign to modern legal systems. The thing operates on principles radically different from contemporary courts. There are no professional judges or lawyers, no police to enforce decisions, and no written laws to cite as precedent. Instead, justice emerges from community consensus, personal honour, and the willingness to back up decisions with violence if necessary. As a Viking, your legal status determines your entire place in society. Free men can participate in the thing, own land, bear arms, and seek redress for wrongs. Slaves' thralls have no legal standing. They are property that can be bought, sold, killed, or freed according to their owner's will. Between free and slave lies a complex middle class of freed slaves' dependents and the economically bound whose legal rights are limited but real. When disputes arise, they follow established patterns. If someone steals your livestock, cheats you in trade, or insults your honour, you don't call the police, you demand satisfaction. This might involve compensation, public apology, or trial by combat. The choice often depends on the relative status of the parties and the severity of the offence. Compensation is the preferred method for resolving most disputes. Viking law recognises that most conflicts stem from economic injuries that can be addressed through payment. Extensive tables of compensation fix the value of different injuries. The price for a broken nose differs from that for a severed hand, which differs from that for a burned house. These compensation rates reflect complex social calculations. The price for killing a slave is far less than for killing a free man, which is far less than for killing a nobleman. The victim's family background, personal reputation, and economic importance all factor into compensation calculations. Women's lives are generally valued less than men's, though influential women can command respect equal to male leaders. The thing assembly itself is theatre as much as legal proceeding. Free men gather in a circle or semicircle, often on a hill or in a sacred grove. The proceedings begin with ritual declarations and invocations of divine favour. Speakers step forward to present their cases, call witnesses, and demand justice. Evidence in Viking courts includes witness testimony, oath swearing, and ordeal. Witnesses must be free men of good reputation who can swear to what they personally observed. Oath helpers can vouch for a person's character and truthfulness, but if their sponsor is later proven false, they share the consequences. Ordeals test divine judgment when human wisdom proves insufficient. The accused might be required to carry hot iron, plunge hands into boiling water, or undergo other painful trials. If the wounds heal cleanly without infection, the gods have shown innocence. If they fester or become infected, guilt is proven and punishment follows. Trial by combat represents the ultimate appeal to divine justice. When other methods fail to resolve disputes, armed conflict determines truth. This might be single combat between disputants or champions fighting on their behalf. The winner has been vindicated by the gods themselves, while the loser faces death or disgrace. But Viking justice isn't just about resolving individual disputes. It's about maintaining social order in a society without strong central authority. The thing serves as a forum for collective decision-making about issues affecting the entire community, responses to threats, allocation of resources, and enforcement of social norms. Participation in the thing is both a right and an obligation for free men. Failing to attend without good reason results in fines and social censure. However, attending means accepting responsibility for enforcing whatever decisions emerge, even if you disagreed with them. The most serious crimes, murder, treason, certain forms of theft, might result in outlawry rather than compensation. The outlaw is declared outside the law's protection, meaning anyone can kill them without penalty. They forfeit all property, lose all legal rights, and must flee into exile or face death. Some outlaws band together as wolves' heads, living by raiding and robbery, until they're hunted down. Enforcement of thing decisions relies on community action rather than professional law enforcement. If someone refuses to pay compensation or defies a judgment, the wronged party can call upon their kinsmen, friends, and allies to enforce justice through violence if necessary. This system works only when most people honour their obligations and face real consequences for defying community standards. The thing also serves important political and social functions beyond law enforcement. Leaders use these assemblies to gauge public opinion, mobilise support for raids or defensive measures, and reinforce their authority through displays of generosity and wisdom. Young men gain reputation by speaking well and demonstrating their commitment to community values. Women generally cannot participate directly in thing proceedings, but influential women can exert significant behind-the-scenes influence. A wise woman's counsel might shape her husband's or son's arguments. Powerful women sometimes speak through male relatives or find other ways to ensure their views are heard. The complexity of Viking law requires considerable legal knowledge for effective participation. You must understand precedent compensation rates, proper procedures for calling witnesses, acceptable forms of oath, and the dividing lines between different categories of crime. Making a procedural error can invalidate an otherwise strong case. Modern people accustomed to professional legal systems might find Viking justice chaotic and unfair. Outcomes depend as much on personal relationships, reputation, and willingness to use violence as on facts or law. But for Vikings, this system maintains order while preserving individual honor and community autonomy, values they prized above abstract notions of equality or impartial justice. In Viking society, honor isn't an abstract concept or personal virtue. It's a tangible asset that can be gained, lost, stolen, or restored through violence. Your honor determines your social standing, your family's prospects, your descendants' inheritance, and, ultimately, your worthiness to feast with gods in Valhalla. This makes the defense of honor not just important, but literally a matter of life and death. Understanding Viking honor requires abandoning modern notions of forgiveness, turning the other cheek, or proportional response. In this society, allowing an insult to go unanswered doesn't make you merciful, it makes you worthless. A man who doesn't defend his honor loses the respect of his community, the loyalty of his followers, and the protection of his kinsmen. Honor can be damaged in countless ways. Public insults, broken oaths, theft, adultery, cowardice in battle, failure to avenge kinsmen, or refusing hospitality all represent blows to your reputation that must be addressed. The damage spreads beyond the individual to encompass entire families, clans, and even future generations. The concept of inherited honor means that you're born into conflicts you didn't create and bear responsibility for restoring dignity lost by ancestors you never met. If your grandfather was killed by members of another family and the death went unavenged, that shame passes to your father and then to you. Honor debts compound over generations until someone settles the account. Blood feuds begin when honor injuries reach the point where compensation alone cannot restore balance. If someone kills your brother, you might accept payment, but only if the killer acknowledges guilt, pays immediately and fully, and shows appropriate remorse. If they refuse any element of proper compensation, blood debt replaces monetary obligation. The cycle of vengeance follows predictable patterns. You kill the man who killed your brother. His kinsmen kill you or one of your relatives in return. Your family retaliates against them. Their family responds to your retaliation. Each killing adds to the total debt while creating new obligations for revenge. These feuds can consume entire communities for generations. Families divide into armed camps, neighbors choose sides, and normal social and economic interactions become impossible. Trade relationships dissolve. Marriages between feuding families are forbidden, and shared public spaces become battlegrounds. But Viking society also recognizes the destructive potential of unchecked feuding and has developed mechanisms to contain and resolve such conflicts. Powerful leaders can broker truces, compensation payments, or even permanent peaces between feuding families. Public assemblies might impose solutions when private negotiations fail. Exile offers another resolution to intractable feuds. Someone might voluntarily leave the community to end a cycle of violence, either permanently or for a specified period. This removes them from the immediate danger while giving emotions time to cool and wisdom to prevail. Some feuds are resolved through single combat between champions representing each side. This channels the conflict into a contained form where divine judgment can determine the outcome. The winner's side is vindicated, and the loser's family must accept defeat and abandon their claims for further vengeance. Women play crucial roles in both perpetuating and resolving feuds. Mothers and wives often urge male relatives to avenge family honor, sometimes composing poems or songs that shame men into action. But women also serve as peacemakers, arranging marriages between feuding families or appealing to shared interests that transcend conflict. The economics of feuding create complex calculations. Pursuing vengeance requires weapons allies and time that could be spent on productive activities. Families must weigh the costs of continued fighting against the social costs of appearing weak or dishonored. Sometimes poverty forces peace when pride demands war. Religious considerations also influence feuding. While Viking culture celebrates martial valor, it also recognizes wisdom and restraint as virtues. Seers might pronounce that the gods favour peace, or ritual obligations might require temporary truces. Sacred spaces often serve as neutral ground where enemies can meet safely. The most devastating feuds involve accusations of sexual impropriety, adultery, rape, or homosexual activity, particularly being the passive partner, represent attacks on manhood that cannot be tolerated. These accusations often lead to immediate violence rather than formal legal proceedings, as the shame involved makes compromise impossible. Kinship networks determine your obligations in any feud. Blood relatives must support your cause even if they disagree with your actions. Marriage creates new alliances that can either expand or complicate feuding relationships. Adopted family members, sworn brothers, and oath-bound followers all have roles to play in honor conflicts. The psychological burden of feuding is enormous. You must remain constantly vigilant against attack, ready to respond to provocation, and prepared to kill or be killed for abstract principles of honor. This state of perpetual tension colors every interaction and decision. Children grow up learning the complex genealogies of honor and shame that define their place in society. They memorize the names of family heroes and enemies, the debts of vengeance they inherit, and the proper responses to different categories of insult. Honor education begins before language develops and continues throughout life. Viking poetry and saga literature celebrate heroes who navigate honor conflicts with wisdom, courage, and ultimate success. These stories provide models for behavior while acknowledging the tragic costs of systems that prioritize honor above life itself. Even the greatest heroes often die young victims of the very code that makes them legendary. The transition away from blood feuds marked one of the major changes in European society, as centralized kingdoms developed professional law enforcement and standing armies. By removing the right of private vengeance from individuals and families, these new systems fundamentally altered the relationship between honor, justice, and violence. But for Vikings living in decentralized communities where personal reputation mattered more than institutional authority honor, and the feuds that defended it represented essential elements of social organization, understanding how these systems worked helps explain how societies can function without strong central governments, and why such societies often remain trapped in cycles of violence that centralized authority eventually solved. Living in such a society means accepting that your actions affect not just yourself, but generations of descendants who will inherit both your achievements and your failures. Every decision carries the weight of family honor, and every slight demands a response that might escalate into full-scale warfare. Modern people prize individual autonomy and personal choice above collective obligation. In Viking society, such attitudes would mark you as selfish, cowardly, and unfit for the company of honorable people. You wouldn't just fail to thrive, you would be expelled from the community, entirely forced to live as an outlaw until someone killed you for the bounty on your head. Leonardo's Forbidden Pursuits: The Secret Life of Genius. Leonardo da Vinci was not the Renaissance master you learned about in school. Behind the polite image of court artist and inventor lay a man whose insatiable curiosity led him into realms that the church considered heretical, the state deemed treasonous, and society judged revolting. His notebooks, written in mirror script to hide their contents, reveal a mind that pushed every boundary of his age, often at great personal risk. In the shadows of Renaissance Italy, Leonardo conducted experiments that would make modern scientists queasy. He dissected corpses stolen from morgues, designed weapons of unprecedented destructive power, and explored natural phenomena in ways that challenged religious doctrine. His genius came with a price-isolation suspicion and the constant threat of persecution by authorities who viewed his work as dangerous to both souls and society. Your first glimpse into Leonardo's secret world comes through cemetery gates in the dead of night. Armed with only a knife, some basic tools, and an obsession with understanding how the human body works, you're about to commit one of the most serious crimes of Renaissance Italy, desecrating Christian graves. The Catholic Church strictly forbids dissection of human bodies, believing that dismembering corpses prevents resurrection and damns souls to eternal punishment. Physicians learn anatomy from thousand-year-old texts by Galen, which describe pig and monkey anatomy rather than human structures. But Leonardo can't accept second-hand knowledge when direct observation is possible. You've spent weeks identifying recent burials in paupers' cemeteries around Milan. The poor are buried in shallow graves with minimal security, making them easier targets than the elaborate tombs of the wealthy. You've studied the guards' routines, noting when they're absent or drunk. Tonight offers the perfect combination of new moon darkness and favourable weather. Digging up a corpse is harder than it seems. The earth is heavy, progress is slow, and every sound echoes in the night silence. Your hands blister on the shovel handle as you work to uncover the simple wooden coffin. The smell hits you first. Not yet the overwhelming stench of decay, but the sweet, sickly odour that precedes it. Opening the coffin reveals the reality of what you're about to do. This isn't an abstract study of anatomy, but a specific person. A young woman, perhaps dead from childbirth or disease, now reduced to an object for study. In the morning, her family might visit her grave to find it empty and desecrated. But Leonardo's pursuit of knowledge admits no room for sentiment. Transporting the body requires careful planning. You've brought a cart and canvas to conceal your grim cargo. The corpse must be moved quickly to Leonardo's private laboratory before dawn reveals your activities to early morning workers. Discovery means certain death. Grave robbing is punishable by hanging, and dissecting human bodies adds charges of heresy and witchcraft. Leonardo's dissection chamber is hidden in the basement of his workshop, accessible only through a concealed entrance. The room contains wooden tables, sharp knives, saws, and detailed drawings of previous anatomical explorations. Oil lamps provide flickering light that casts dancing shadows on the walls, covered with sketches of human organs, skeletal structures, and muscular systems. The dissection process is methodical and nauseating. Leonardo begins by opening the chest cavity, revealing the heart, lungs, and major blood vessels in their natural positions. He makes detailed drawings of each structure, noting how they connect and function together. His artistic training proves invaluable. He can capture subtle curves, textures, and relationships that would escape a purely scientific observer. But working with decomposing flesh presents unique challenges. The body deteriorates rapidly, especially in warm weather, making speed essential. The smell becomes overwhelming, a mixture of decay, bodily fluids, and the oils Leonardo uses to preserve specimens. You develop mouth breathing and stomach control that would serve a battlefield surgeon. Renaissance preservation techniques are primitive. Leonardo experiments with various solutions, wine vinegar herb extracts, to slow decomposition, but nothing works for long. Each corpse provides only a few days of study before becoming too degraded for detailed observation. This means multiple grave robbings, each carrying the same risks of discovery and execution. The physical demands are exhausting. Dissection requires hours of precise cutting, careful observation, and detailed note-taking while standing over a corpse in poor lighting. Your back aches, your eyes strain, and your hands cramp from gripping instruments, but the knowledge gained is revolutionary. Leonardo's anatomical discoveries challenge everything physicians believe. He finds that arteries carry blood, not air, as taught by ancient texts. He observes how muscles attach to bones and create movement. He maps the nervous system with unprecedented detail. Each revelation contradicts established medical doctrine based on religious authority rather than observation. The psychological toll of this work is severe. You become intimately familiar with death in its most visceral form. The boundary between the sacred and scientific dissolves as you reduce human beings to collections of organs, tissues, and systems. Some nights you dream of the faces of the corpses you've dissected, wondering about their lives, their families, their dreams cut short. Documentation requires its own secrecy. Leonardo writes his anatomical notes in mirror script, making them illegible to casual observers. His drawings are incredibly detailed, but deliberately obscured through symbolic language and hidden meanings. If authorities discovered his notebooks, the evidence of heretical activities could result in torture and execution. The isolation is perhaps the worst aspect. You can't share these incredible discoveries with other scholars, can't publish findings that advance medical knowledge, can't even discuss your work with close friends. The price of pushing beyond acceptable boundaries is intellectual loneliness that few can endure. Yet the scientific breakthroughs achieved through this dangerous work are extraordinary. Leonardo's understanding of human anatomy surpasses that of any contemporary physician. His observations wouldn't be equaled until the systematic anatomical studies of Andreas Vesalius decades later. The knowledge gained through grave robbing and illegal dissection forms the foundation for modern medical science. Each stolen corpse, each secret dissection, each hidden notebook page represents a victory of curiosity over fear, knowledge over ignorance, and scientific method over religious doctrine. But the personal cost, the constant danger, the social isolation, the psychological burden, demonstrates why so few people possess the courage to challenge established beliefs and pursue forbidden knowledge. Living Leonardo's secret life means accepting that pursuing truth sometimes requires breaking laws, violating social norms, and risking everything for insights that others fear to pursue. You wouldn't just be studying anatomy, you'd be redefining the relationship between religion, science, and human dignity in ways that threaten the very foundations of Renaissance society. Beyond his anatomical studies, Leonardo channeled his genius into designing instruments of war that were centuries ahead of their time. Renaissance Italy was a patchwork of competing city-states, foreign powers, and mercenary armies locked in constant conflict. Military innovation offered both intellectual challenge and practical employment for someone with Leonardo's skills, but it also meant creating weapons capable of unprecedented destruction. Your workbench is covered with sketches that would terrify contemporary armies. Massive crossbows mounted on wheels, armoured vehicles driven by internal mechanisms, bridges that collapse on command, and siege engines that could reduce the strongest fortress walls to rubble. These aren't just artistic flights of fancy, but carefully engineered designs, complete with detailed mechanical specifications. The giant crossbow project begins with a commission from the Duke of Milan, who wants a weapon capable of launching projectiles large enough to demolish enemy fortifications. Your design calls for a bow nearly 80 feet wide, operated by a complex system of gears and winches that allow a single operator to generate enormous tension in the bowstring. Building a working prototype requires solving countless engineering challenges. The bow arms must be strong enough to store tremendous energy without breaking, yet light enough to be transportable. You experiment with different types of wood-laminated construction techniques and reinforcement methods. The release mechanism must hold tons of force securely, yet trigger instantly when activated. The psychological warfare potential of such a weapon is as important as its destructive capability. An enemy army seeing this enormous machine being wheeled onto the battlefield would face a terror weapon unlike anything in their experience. The sound of its discharge, like thunder combined with breaking timber, would be audible for miles, advertising your army's technological superiority. Your tank design pushes the boundaries of Renaissance engineering even further. The armoured vehicle features a circular slope design that deflects incoming projectiles while housing soldiers who operate hand cranks connected to wheels or tracks. Gun ports allow the crew to fire weapons while remaining protected, creating a mobile fortress capable of breaking through enemy lines. The internal mechanisms present enormous challenges. Human power must be efficiently transferred to the wheels through a system of gears, cranks, and transmission components. The crew must be able to see where they're going, aim their weapons, and coordinate their movements while enclosed in a claustrophobic metal shell. Ventilation becomes critical to prevent the crew from suffocating on their own breath and the smoke from their weapons. Bridge design takes on military significance when you develop structures that can be rapidly deployed for river crossings, but also quickly destroyed to prevent enemy pursuit. Your revolving bridges pivot on central supports, allowing passage for friendly forces, but rotating to block enemy access. Collapsible bridges can be assembled from prefabricated components and dismantled when strategic value changes. The cannon designs represent perhaps your most dangerous work. These weapons concentrate explosive force in ways that could revolutionize warfare, or kill everyone involved in their construction and operation. Your innovations include multiple barrel designs that fire rapid sequences of projectiles, adjustable mounts that allow precise aiming, and improved gunpowder formulations that increase range and destructive power. Testing these weapons requires utmost secrecy and extreme caution. Military innovations must be demonstrated to potential buyers, but showing your weapons to the wrong people could result in espionage theft or worse. Enemy agents actively seek information about new weapon developments, and the line between customer and spy often blurs in Renaissance politics. The moral implications of your work trouble you at times. Each innovation you create will be used to kill people, destroy cities, and advance the ambitions of rulers whose causes may or may not be just. Your mechanical genius enables destruction on scales never before imagined, making you complicit in future suffering, even if you never personally wield these weapons. But Renaissance patronage requires providing what patrons demand: and military innovation offers some of the most lucrative commissions available. The alternative to accepting military projects might be poverty, artistic irrelevance, or forced service under less favourable conditions. Genius must eat, and war pays well for those willing to feed its appetites. Your weapon designs must balance theoretical possibility with practical construction using available materials and techniques. Creating a working tank with Renaissance metalworking, for instance, requires compromises between protection, mobility, and manufacturability. Many of your most advanced concepts await technological developments that won't occur for centuries. Documentation becomes a security issue when dealing with military innovations. Your notebooks contain information that could tip the balance of power between competing states, making them valuable targets for theft or espionage. The mirror writing that conceals anatomical studies serves an even more critical function when protecting military secrets. The competition among Renaissance inventors is fierce and sometimes deadly. Other engineers seek the same patrons, pursue similar innovations, and guard their own secrets jealously. Industrial espionage, sabotage, and even assassination represent occupational hazards when your work could determine the outcome of wars. Yet the intellectual satisfaction of solving complex engineering problems drives you to continue despite the moral reservations and practical dangers. Each successful design demonstrates the power of systematic thinking, careful observation, and creative problem-solving. Your war machines embody the same scientific principles that govern all mechanical devices. They're just applied to destructive rather than constructive purposes. The irony isn't lost on you that these engines of destruction often incorporate the same anatomical knowledge gained through dissecting human corpses. Understanding how muscles and bones create movement informs your designs for mechanical motion. The same curiosity that drives you to explore the human body also leads you to devise increasingly efficient methods for destroying it. Working in Leonardo's engineering workshop means living with the constant tension between creative fulfillment and moral responsibility. Your innovations push the boundaries of what's mechanically possible while potentially unleashing unprecedented destruction upon the world. You're not just building machines, you're reshaping the nature of human conflict and determining whether technology will serve humanity or dominate it. Among all Leonardo's forbidden pursuits, perhaps none challenged religious doctrine more directly than his obsession with human flight. The ability to fly was considered solely within God's domain, an ambition that bordered on the hubris that cast Satan from heaven. Yet Leonardo couldn't resist the challenge of understanding how birds soar and whether humans might join them in the sky. Your study of flight begins with countless hours observing birds. From hidden positions in towers and treetops, you watch how different species achieve lift control direction and land gracefully. You dissect bird corpses to understand wing structure, muscle attachment, and the relationship between body weight and wing area. Each observation fills your notebooks with sketches and calculations that inch closer to unlocking the secret of flight. The religious implications of your work are profound and dangerous. Genesis states that God separated the heavens from the earth, establishing distinct realms for different parts of creation. Humans belong on the ground, birds in the air, angels in the celestial sphere. Attempting to breach these boundaries represents a fundamental challenge to divine order that could be interpreted as heretical or even demonic. Church scholars cite the Tower of Babel as a cautionary tale about human attempts to reach toward heaven. They interpret your flying machine designs as similar acts of pride that will inevitably bring divine punishment. Even discussing the possibility of human flight can attract unwanted attention from religious authorities who see such ideas as spiritually dangerous. Your ornithopter designs attempt to replicate bird flight through mechanical wing-flapping devices powered by human muscle. The wings must be large enough to generate sufficient lift but light enough to be operated by a pilot's strength. You experiment with different materials, silk, wooden frames, leather, even feathers, seeking the optimal combination of weight and effectiveness. The mechanical challenges are staggering. Human muscles generate far less power per unit of body weight than bird muscles, meaning your flying machines require enormous wings or exceptionally efficient mechanisms. Your designs incorporate pulleys, levers, and cranks that amplify human strength, but the power-to-weight ratio remains problematic. Testing your flying machines requires both courage and secrecy. Initial experiments involve jumping from increasingly higher platforms with smaller wing attachments to understand lift generation and control. These tests often result in painful crashes that leave you battered and bruised but more knowledgeable about aerodynamic principles. The psychological aspects of attempting flight are as challenging as the physical ones. Humans evolved as ground-dwelling creatures. Our innate fear of falling represents a survival mechanism that must be overcome through conscious effort. Strapping yourself to an untested flying machine requires conquering millions of years of evolutionary programming. Your parachute designs emerge from recognizing that controlled falling might be safer than attempting powered flight. The pyramid-shaped canopy made from linen and wooden supports could theoretically allow someone to jump from great heights and land safely. But testing this device requires finding willing subjects or risking your own life on calculations that might prove fatally flawed. The glider experiments represent a different approach to the flight problem. Instead of generating lift through wing flapping, these designs use fixed wings to convert falling motion into forward movement. Understanding how birds soar without flapping leads you to designs that anticipate modern glider aircraft by centuries. Wind patterns become objects of intense study as you realize that successful flight requires understanding air movement as well as wing design. You climb to high places during different weather conditions, observing how air currents flow around mountains, across valleys, and through urban spaces. Your meteorological observations fill notebooks with data that wouldn't be systematically studied for decades. The military applications of flight technology aren't lost on you. Aerial reconnaissance could revolutionize warfare by allowing commanders to observe enemy positions from above. Flying vehicles could deliver attacks from unexpected directions or transport messages across besieged cities. These potential applications make your research valuable to patrons, but also dangerous if it falls into enemy hands. Material science limitations constantly frustrate your flying machine aspirations. Renaissance technology can't produce materials strong enough yet light enough to make human-powered flight practical. Your designs push available materials to their limits and beyond, often resulting in structural failures during testing. The medical knowledge gained from anatomical dissections proves crucial for understanding flight muscle requirements. Birds have specialized chest muscles much larger in proportion to their body size than humans possess. Your calculations reveal that human-powered flight might require augmenting natural strength through mechanical advantage or abandoning muscle power entirely in favor of other energy sources. Scale model experiments help you test aerodynamic principles without risking human life. You build miniature flying machines, launch them from towers, and observe their flight characteristics. These models reveal important insights about wing shapes, weight distribution, and control mechanisms that inform your full-scale designs. The isolation imposed by working on forbidden technology is particularly acute with flight research. You can't discuss your ideas openly with other scholars, can't publish findings that challenge religious doctrine, and can't even demonstrate successful experiments without risking charges of sorcery or heresy. Yet the dream of flight represents something fundamental about human curiosity and ambition. Despite the dangers, the technical challenges, and the religious implications, you continue pursuing this impossible goal because it embodies the essence of what makes humans different from other creatures. The desire to transcend natural limitations through knowledge and ingenuity. Your flying machine work establishes principles that wouldn't be successfully applied until the Wright brothers' flights 4 centuries later. The detailed observations of bird flight, the understanding of aerodynamic forces, and the recognition that human muscle power alone is insufficient for sustained flight, all anticipate later developments in aviation. Living Leonardo's quest for human flight means accepting that some goals may be impossible to achieve in your lifetime while pursuing them anyway, because the attempt itself advances human understanding. You're not just trying to build machines, you're challenging the fundamental assumptions about human potential and the boundaries that separate earthly existence from divine prerogatives. Leonardo's scientific investigations extended far beyond anatomy and engineering into realms that challenged the very foundations of Renaissance natural philosophy. His observations of geological processes, astronomical phenomena, and physical forces led him to conclusions that contradicted both religious doctrine and scholarly consensus, placing him in constant danger of accusations of heresy. Your geological studies begin with simple observations of rock formations during your travels through northern Italy. The presence of marine fossils in mountain peaks puzzles contemporary scholars who explain them as remnants of the biblical flood. But your detailed analysis of sedimentary layers, erosion patterns, and fossil distributions suggest a very different story, one that implies an Earth far older than religious texts indicate. The timescales involved in your geological theories are staggering by Renaissance standards. Biblical chronology places Earth's creation at roughly 6,000 years ago, with the flood occurring about 4,000 years past. But the evidence you observe, the slow accumulation of sedimentary layers, the gradual carving of valleys by rivers, the formation of mountains through unimaginable pressures, suggests processes operating over periods that dwarf human history. Your notebook entries describe discovering fossilized sea creatures in rocks high in the Apennine Mountains, hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. The traditional explanation that these remains were left by Noah's flood doesn't align with your observations of how water moves, how sediments deposit, and how long such processes require. Water studies reveal principles that anticipate modern hydraulics and fluid dynamics. You observe how water flows in rivers, how it cuts through stone over time, and how it carries sediments that gradually build up river deltas. These observations contradict Aristotelian physics, which held that water naturally flows in straight lines unless impeded by obstacles. Your experiments with flowing water use carefully constructed channels, containers, and measuring devices to understand friction, pressure, and turbulence. You inject colored substances into flowing water to trace current patterns, discovering that water movement is far more complex than prevailing theories suggest. Astronomical observations present even greater challenges to established doctrine. While you can't openly dispute the church-sanctioned geocentric model that places Earth at the center of the universe, your private notes reveal awareness that celestial mechanics might work differently than officially taught. Your detailed studies of lunar craters, planetary movements, and star positions use instruments of your own design to achieve unprecedented accuracy. The patterns you observe don't always align with predictions based on Ptolemaic astronomy, suggesting that the official model of celestial mechanics might be incomplete or incorrect. Light studies lead you to conclusions about vision perspective and the nature of illumination that challenge both scientific and philosophical orthodoxy. Your experiments with mirrors, lenses, and prisms reveal that light behaves according to mathematical principles that can be predicted and controlled. The camera obscura experiments you conduct help explain how the human eye works, contradicting prevailing theories about vision that hold the eye amidst rays that interact with objects. Your observations show that light travels from objects to the eye, not the reverse, fundamentally altering understanding of perception. Plant studies reveal growth patterns, phototropism, and structural engineering principles that demonstrate nature's sophisticated designs. You dissect flowers, analyze leaf structures, and study tree rings to understand how plants respond to environmental conditions over time. Your botanical investigations include detailed studies of how plants compete for light, how water and nutrients move through plant structures, and how different species adapt to various environmental niches. These observations anticipate ecological thinking that wouldn't develop for centuries. The physics experiments you conduct with pulleys, levers, inclined planes, and projectiles reveal mathematical relationships between force, motion, and energy that contradict Aristotelian mechanics taught in universities. Your findings suggest that motion continues unless impeded, rather than requiring continuous force to maintain. Friction studies use carefully controlled experiments to understand how different surface interactions affect motion. You test various materials, lubricants, and contact pressures to develop practical applications for your mechanical designs while simultaneously advancing theoretical understanding of physical forces. Heat and combustion experiments explore the nature of fire, the role of air in burning, and the relationships between temperature, fuel, and flame characteristics. Your observations challenge the classical theory of four elements: earth, air, fire, and water, by suggesting that combustion involves chemical transformations rather than simple mixing of elemental qualities. Weather studies attempt to find patterns in atmospheric phenomena that could enable prediction of storms, rainfall, and seasonal changes. You correlate cloud formations, wind directions, barometric sensations, and animal behaviors to develop a primitive meteorological system. The mathematical principles underlying your natural philosophy research set you apart from most Renaissance scholars. While they rely on qualitative descriptions and classical authorities, you use quantitative measurements, geometric analysis, and systematic observation to develop testable theories about natural phenomena. Your work methods emphasize direct observation over accepted authority, controlled experimentation over casual observation, and mathematical analysis over philosophical speculation. This approach wouldn't become standard in natural philosophy until the scientific revolution of the 17th century. The isolation these investigations impose is intellectual as well as social. Your insights into geological time, Astronomical mechanics and physical forces can't be shared with contemporary scholars without risking accusations of contradicting divine revelation, undermining moral order, or promoting dangerous errors. Yet the pursuit of natural philosophy represents the purest expression of human curiosity, the desire to understand how the world actually works, rather than how authorities claim it should work. Your investigations lay groundwork for scientific methods that would eventually transform human understanding of nature and our place within it. Living Leonardo's secret scientific life means accepting that truth sometimes conflicts with authority, that observation trumps tradition, and that understanding nature requires courage to question everything previous generations believed without examination. You're not just studying the world, you're pioneering an entirely new way of thinking about reality itself. The cumulative effect of Leonardo's forbidden pursuits was a life lived on the margins of Renaissance society, constantly balancing intellectual honesty against physical survival. His notebooks filled with mirror writing and coded references represent not just scientific observations, but a mind forced into perpetual concealment to avoid persecution for ideas that were centuries ahead of their time. The social isolation was perhaps the heaviest burden. While other scholars could discuss their work, openly publish findings, and build upon each other's research, Leonardo remained trapped in intellectual solitude. His greatest discoveries, anatomical insights that could revolutionize medicine engineering innovations that could transform warfare natural philosophy, principles that could reshape human understanding of the world, had to remain hidden in coded notebooks that might never be deciphered. Paranoia became a survival trait rather than a character flaw. Every knock on the door could bring church officials investigating reports of heretical activities. Every new acquaintance might be an agent seeking information about military innovations. Every casual conversation required careful screening to avoid revealing dangerous opinions or forbidden knowledge. The financial costs were enormous. Funding illegal research meant either self-financing through legitimate commissions or finding patrons who would support dangerous work. Many potential benefactors avoided association with controversial projects, limiting Leonardo's resources and forcing him to work under primitive conditions. The psychological toll of maintaining dual identities, public genius and secret investigator, strained even Leonardo's remarkable mental resilience. He had to constantly police his own speech, hide his emotions when others expressed ignorant opinions, and pretend enthusiasm for officially sanctioned ideas he knew to be false. Physical dangers manifested regularly. Laboratory accidents with novel chemicals or experimental devices caused injuries that couldn't be treated openly without explaining their cause. Grave robbing expeditions risked not just legal punishment, but violence from angry mobs. Military experiments with explosive devices or mechanical devices carried risks that modern safety protocols would consider unacceptable. The fragmentation of his work across multiple secret projects prevented Leonardo from achieving the systematic progress that would have been possible under open research conditions. Energy spent concealing activities, moving locations, and maintaining false identities could have been devoted to advancing understanding and developing applications for his discoveries. Health consequences accumulated from working in poor conditions with dangerous materials. Dissection work exposed him to diseases, anatomical experiments with harmful substances damaged his body, and the stress of constant secrecy took its toll on both physical and mental well-being. He aged prematurely and died with many projects incomplete. Yet despite all these costs, Leonardo never abandoned his pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The drive to understand took precedence over personal comfort, social acceptance, or physical safety. His willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of truth established a model for scientific integrity that inspired later generations of investigators. The historical impact of Leonardo's secret work far exceeded anything he achieved through official commissions. His anatomical studies laid foundations for modern medicine. His engineering designs anticipated developments that wouldn't occur for centuries, and his natural philosophy investigations established empirical methods that became standard scientific practice. The notebooks themselves became a testimony to the power of individual genius operating under impossible conditions. Written in code to protect their contents filled with revolutionary insights that couldn't be safely shared, they represent one of history's most remarkable achievements in intellectual independence and personal courage. Leonardo's life demonstrates that advancing human knowledge sometimes requires individuals willing to risk everything for ideas that challenge established authority. His secret pursuits remind us that progress often depends on people brave enough to question what everyone knows to be true and persistent enough to seek evidence that might prove them wrong. Modern scientists working under authoritarian regimes face similar choices between intellectual honesty and personal safety. Leonardo's example provides inspiration for those who must choose between conformity and truth, between acceptance and exile, between security and the advancement of human understanding. The price of genius in Renaissance Italy was isolation, danger, and often death. But the cost of not pursuing forbidden knowledge was intellectual stagnation, medical ignorance, and technological backwardness that kept humanity trapped in patterns of thought that had ossified over centuries. Leonardo paid that price willingly because he understood something that many of his contemporaries missed. The human capacity for knowledge is unlimited, but actualizing that capacity requires courage to venture beyond the boundaries that society, religion, and tradition erect around acceptable inquiry. His secret life reminds us that some pursuits are so important that they justify extraordinary risks, that some truths are so valuable that they merit any sacrifice, and that the progress of human understanding depends on individuals willing to pay the price of genius in full. In the heart of ancient Maya cities, where pyramids pierced the jungle canopy and priests read omens in the flight of birds, there existed ball courts that were far more than sporting venues. These stone arenas hosted a game that was simultaneously athletic competition, religious ritual, political theatre, and cosmic battle. The Maya ball game wasn't just entertainment, it was a matter of life and death that could determine the fate of individuals, communities, and the universe itself. You stand at the edge of a ball court in the great city of Chichen Itza, around 900 AD. The playing field stretches before you, a long, narrow alley between sloping walls, each surface carved with intricate reliefs depicting gods, heroes, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness. This isn't a place for casual sport, but a sacred theatre where human drama merges with divine purpose. The ball court at Chichen Itza is the largest and most magnificent in all of Mesoamerica, but ball courts existed throughout the Maya world. Each court was built according to precise mathematical and astronomical principles that connected the earthly game to cosmic forces beyond human comprehension. The playing alley represents the crack through which the Maya hero twins descended into the underworld to challenge the lords of death. Every game reenacts this mythical journey with players taking the roles of light and darkness, order and chaos, life and death. The stone walls aren't just boundaries, but representations of the mountains that divide the world of the living from the realm of Xibalba. The acoustics of the court were carefully designed to amplify sound in supernatural ways. A whisper at one end of the field can be heard clearly at the other, while conversations in the center seem to echo from the heavens themselves. This acoustic engineering served both practical purposes, allowing spectators to hear the action, and spiritual ones, connecting human voices to divine communications. Carved stone rings mounted high on the court walls represent the passage between worlds. Getting the rubber ball through these rings during play was considered an act of cosmic significance, opening pathways between dimensions and allowing communication with gods and ancestors. The difficulty of scoring through these small targets meant that successfully doing so was interpreted as divine approval. The ball itself was no ordinary sphere, but a sacred object imbued with a spiritual power. Made from the latex sap of rubber trees, the ball was solid, heavy, and capable of inflicting serious injury. Its round shape represented the sun's journey across the sky, while its bouncing motion mimicked the movement of celestial bodies through the heavens. Different sizes and weights of balls were used for different types of games and different levels of competition. Training balls were smaller and lighter, allowing novice players to develop skills without excessive risk. Ritual balls used in the most sacred competitions were larger, heavier, and sometimes embedded with special materials that enhanced their spiritual significance. The court surfaces were perfectly smooth, polished stone, designed to provide consistent ball bounces while being hard enough to withstand the impact of heavy rubber spheres traveling at high speeds. Players had to understand not just the physics of ball movement, but also how different weather conditions, court temperatures, and even celestial alignments might affect the ball's behavior. Spectator areas were built into the court architecture, with different sections reserved for different social classes. Nobles and priests occupied elevated platforms that provided the best views and also placed them closer to the heavens during these cosmic performances. Common people watched from lower areas, but their cheers and reactions were considered essential elements of the spiritual energy that empowered the players. The entire court complex included associated buildings, chambers for player preparation, spaces for pre-game rituals, storage areas for sacred equipment, and sometimes residential quarters for the elite athletes who dedicated their lives to the game. These facilities made ball courts complete ceremonial centers rather than simple sports venues. Maintenance of the courts required constant attention from skilled craftsmen who understood both architectural principles and spiritual requirements. The playing surfaces had to remain flawlessly smooth, the stone carvings needed protection from jungle growth, and the acoustic properties required regular testing and adjustment. Understanding the ball court means recognizing that you're not entering a stadium, but a sacred space where every stone, every carving, every measurement has religious and cosmological significance. The game played here isn't sport, but ritual drama with real consequences for players and spectators alike. The Maya ball game wasn't invented by humans, but given to them by the gods as a way to participate in the cosmic order. The Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Maya, tells how the hero twins Hunahpu and Xbalanque played ball in the heavens until their noise disturbed the lords of the underworld, leading to challenges, tests, and ultimately the twins' victory over death itself. This creation myth establishes the spiritual framework for every game played in Maya ball courts. Players aren't just athletes, but actors in a cosmic drama reenacting the eternal conflict between opposing forces that keeps the universe in balance. Every match is simultaneously a historical event and a mythological performance. The hero twins story provides the template for proper play and behavior. Their cleverness, courage, and ultimate transformation into celestial bodies offers a model for players who might themselves achieve divine status through exceptional performance. The twins' journey through Xibalba, facing tests and challenges that required both athletic skill and spiritual wisdom, parallels the real experiences of elite ball players. Different Maya cities and regions emphasized different aspects of the mythological cycle. Some focused on the twins' initial ball games that aroused the underworld's anger. Others reenacted their trials in Xibalba, where they faced tests of intelligence as well as athletic ability. Still others celebrated their resurrection and ascension to become the sun and moon. The underworld lords who challenged the hero twins represent the forces of death, disease, and chaos that constantly threaten human existence. In the ball game, one team might take the role of these dark powers while their opponents represent the forces of life and order. Victory in such matchups had implications extending far beyond individual achievement. Religious calendar cycles determined when different mythological themes would be emphasized in ball game competitions. During certain times of year, games reenacted creation stories. At other periods, they focused on agricultural cycles or astronomical events. The most important matches coincided with dates when cosmic forces were believed to be particularly active, or when divine intervention was most needed. Player identification with mythological figures wasn't merely symbolic. Through ritual preparation, costume, and performance, players were believed to actually embody the heroic or divine characters they represented. This transformation was considered real and consequential. A player channeling the power of a hero twin could genuinely become superhuman during competition. The spiritual preparation required for high-level ball game competition included fasting, purification rituals, dream interpretation, and consultation with priests and shamans. Players had to achieve altered states of consciousness that connected them to the divine realm and allowed them to serve as vessels for supernatural forces. Costume and body modification played crucial roles in this transformation process. Players decorated themselves with paint feathers, jade ornaments, and other materials that symbolically connected them to their mythological identities. Some underwent permanent modifications, filed teeth ear and lip plug scarification, that marked them as dedicated servants of the ball game gods. The outcome of mythologically themed matches was interpreted as communication from the divine realm about current events, future prospects, and the spiritual health of the community. A victory by the team representing life forces might indicate favorable agricultural conditions, while triumph by death-associated players could suggest impending challenges requiring special precautions. Seasonal celebrations often concluded with massive ball game competitions that brought together teams from multiple cities and regions. These tournaments weren't just athletic events, but religious festivals that reinforced cultural unity and renewed cosmic balances essential for continued existence. The integration of mythology into ball game culture created a rich tradition of associated arts, sculpture, painting, poetry, and performance that kept these sacred stories alive in public consciousness. Court carvings, ceramic decorations, and textile designs all depicted scenes from hero twin mythology, ensuring that even non-players understood the spiritual significance of the game. Understanding the mythological dimensions of the Maya ball game reveals that you're not just learning rules and techniques, but becoming part of a spiritual tradition that connects earthly actions to cosmic forces. Every serve, every play, every victory or defeat has meaning that extends far beyond individual accomplishment into the realm of universal truth. Becoming a Maya ball player required more than athletic ability. It demanded total dedication to a way of life that combined physical training, spiritual development, and cultural education. Elite players underwent preparation that began in childhood and continued throughout their playing careers, transforming them into living bridges between human and divine realms. Selection for ball player training often occurred through divination and observation of childhood behavior. Children who showed exceptional coordination, fearlessness, or spiritual sensitivity might be identified by priests as potential candidates for elite training. Some were chosen based on dreams, omens, or their birth dates in the sacred calendar. Physical conditioning focused on developing the specific skills needed for ball game success. Unlike modern sports that rely heavily on hands, the Maya ball game prohibited use of hands and feet to control the ball. Players could only use their hips, shoulders, forearms, and heads to keep the ball in play, requiring unusual muscle development and body control. Hip movement was particularly crucial since players needed to be able to strike the heavy rubber ball with enough force to keep it airborne while maintaining precise control over its direction. Training involved countless hours practicing hip strikes against balls suspended from trees or thrown by partners, gradually building the muscle memory necessary for split-second decisions during actual play. The physical toll of this training was severe. The constant impact of the heavy rubber ball against unprotected body parts created bruises, welts, and sometimes permanent damage. Many players developed distorted hip bones from repeated heavy impacts. Some training methods involved wearing protective gear made from leather and wood, but elite players prided themselves on performing without such aids. Flexibility and agility training incorporated dance movements and acrobatic exercises that developed whole-body coordination. Players needed to be able to dive roll and instantly recover their footing while tracking the ball's movement and anticipating their opponent's actions. The game demanded cat-like reflexes combined with the endurance to maintain peak performance throughout extended matches. Spiritual preparation was equally rigorous and far more complex than physical training. Prospective players studied Maya mathematics, astronomy, and calendar systems to understand the cosmic forces that influenced ball game outcomes. They memorized creation myths, learned to interpret omens, and developed skills in dream vision and trance states. Dietary restrictions and purification practices shaped every aspect of a player's life. During training periods and before important matches, players might fast for days, consume only specific foods, or abstain from certain activities believed to diminish spiritual power. These practices were designed to purify body and spirit, while demonstrating commitment to the sacred nature of their role. Mental training included memorization of complex ritual sequences, proper forms of address for different gods and nobles, and the intricate protocols governing ball game ceremonies. Players had to master not just the physical aspects of the game, but also the elaborate cultural knowledge required to participate appropriately in its spiritual dimensions. Strategy development went far beyond simple game tactics. Players learned to read their opponent's spiritual conditions, to recognize when cosmic forces favored certain types of play, and to adapt their approach based on astronomical alignments, calendar dates, and ritual requirements. The most successful players combined athletic excellence with supernatural insight. Pain tolerance was cultivated through increasingly challenging training exercises. Players practiced taking hits from the ball without flinching, learned to continue playing despite injuries, and developed the mental toughness necessary to perform under the extreme pressure of ritual matches where failure could mean death. Team coordination required deep understanding of both partners' abilities and spiritual states. In paired competitions, players had to achieve almost telepathic communication, anticipating each other's movements and responding to the ball's trajectory with perfect synchronization. This level of partnership often developed through years of training together. Visual training helped players track the ball's rapid movement in the challenging lighting conditions of the court. Games were sometimes played during dawn or dusk when shadows could make ball trajectories difficult to follow. Players practiced in various lighting conditions and learned to use peripheral vision and sound cues to track the ball's position. Weapons training was included because ball game skills translated to combat effectiveness. The same hip and shoulder movements used to strike balls could be adapted for fighting with clubs, axes, and other weapons. Many elite ball players served as warriors when their cities required military service. Apprenticeship systems paired novice players with experienced masters who guided their development over years or decades. These relationships involved not just athletic instruction, but spiritual mentoring, cultural education, and introduction to the complex social networks surrounding elite ball game culture. Recovery and injury management required sophisticated understanding of anatomy and healing practices. Players learned to treat their own injuries, to recognize signs of serious damage that required medical attention, and to maintain their bodies throughout long careers of physical punishment. The training regimen varied according to the player's role within their society. Royal family members might receive different preparation than commoners selected for their athletic potential. Priests who participated in ritual matches required more extensive spiritual education, while players focused on entertainment venues might emphasize acrobatic and performance aspects. Career progression from novice to master followed recognizable stages marked by ritual initiations, public demonstrations of skill, and gradually increasing participation in important matches. The most successful players eventually became teachers themselves, passing on their knowledge to new generations, while continuing to participate in the most sacred competitions. Geographic variations in training methods reflected different regional traditions and emphases within Maya ball game culture. Coastal cities might stress different techniques than highland communities, while northern and southern regions had distinct approaches to spiritual preparation. The ultimate goal of ball player training wasn't just athletic excellence, but transformation into vessels capable of channeling divine power during competition. The most dedicated players spent their entire lives pursuing this synthesis of physical skill and spiritual development, becoming living links between human communities and the cosmic order that governed all existence. Understanding ball player training reveals the enormous commitment required to participate meaningfully in Maya ball game culture. You wouldn't just be learning a sport, but dedicating your life to a spiritual discipline that demanded everything you had to give, while offering the possibility of achieving something approaching divine status. The stakes in Maya ball game competitions extended far beyond trophy awards or personal glory. For some players, and in certain contexts, losing meant paying the ultimate price. Human sacrifice connected to ball game outcomes represented one of the most dramatic aspects of Maya religion, where athletic failure could result in death as an offering to the gods. The relationship between ball game and sacrifice wasn't uniform across all Maya communities or time periods. Some regions and eras emphasized the sacrificial aspects more heavily than others, and the specific circumstances that triggered fatal outcomes varied considerably. But the possibility of death added a psychological intensity to competition that modern athletes can barely imagine. Archaeological evidence from sites like Chichen Itza includes carved reliefs depicting ball game-related sacrifices. These images show players being decapitated with their blood spurting from severed necks in patterns that form sacred serpents. Such carvings weren't just artistic representations, but documentary records of actual practices that occurred in these sacred spaces. The logic behind ball game sacrifice stemmed from Maya understanding of cosmic balance and divine communication. The gods gave their blood to create humans, therefore, humans must reciprocate by offering their blood to maintain the universe's equilibrium. Ball game competitions provided a mechanism for this exchange, with the outcome determining who had the honor of making the ultimate sacrifice. Different types of matches carried different levels of mortal risk. Routine training games and local competitions rarely involved fatal consequences, but major religious festivals, political crises, or astronomical events might call for matches where the stakes included human lives. Players understood these distinctions and prepared accordingly. The identity of the sacrifice victim wasn't always straightforward. Some theories suggest that winning players were sacrificed because they had proven themselves worthy offerings to the gods. Others propose that losers paid the price for their failure to channel divine favour effectively. The reality probably varied depending on specific circumstances and regional traditions. Captive enemies provided another source of sacrifice victims who might be forced to participate in bull games before their deaths. These involuntary players faced impossible odds competing against skilled athletes in games where their only possible outcome was death. Such matches serve multiple purposes: entertainment, religious ritual, and demonstration of power over defeated foes. Voluntary sacrifice represented the highest form of religious devotion, with some elite bull players choosing to offer their lives at the peak of their careers as acts of supreme spiritual dedication. These self-sacrificing athletes were remembered as heroes who achieved immediate transformation into divine beings through their willingness to die for cosmic harmony. The methods of sacrifice associated with bull game defeats varied, but often involved decapitation, heart extraction, or drowning. Each method carried specific ritual significance and was chosen based on the religious purposes being served. The sacrificial act itself was carefully choreographed ceremonial performance, not random violence. Psychological preparation for potentially fatal matches required extraordinary mental conditioning. Players had to achieve states of mind where death became acceptable or even desired as a pathway to divine union. This psychological transformation was supported by religious training ritual practices and sometimes mind-altering substances that reduced fear and enhanced spiritual receptivity. Spectator participation in sacrifice rituals created community bonds through shared witnessing of ultimate religious devotion. The crowd's role wasn't passive observation, but active participation in cosmic drama that renewed divine contracts and ensured continued prosperity for their society. Family members of sacrificed players often received special honors and practical support from their communities. The death of a bull player in service to the gods brought prestige to their lineage and demonstrated their family's dedication to religious obligations. These social benefits helped compensate for the personal tragedy of loss. Economic implications of bull game sacrifice included the investment required to train elite players and the community costs of losing skilled individuals. The willingness to sacrifice valuable human resources demonstrated the supreme importance of maintaining proper relationships with divine forces. Religious interpretation of sacrificial outcomes provided guidance for community decision-making. The manner of a player's death, the circumstances surrounding their sacrifice, and subsequent events were all analysed for signs about divine approval and future prospects. Modern sensibilities find the concept of death as the price of athletic failure deeply disturbing. But for the Maya, this practice represented logical application of their understanding of cosmic order. The bull game wasn't entertainment, but sacred duty, and the ultimate sacrifice ensured that human communities remained aligned with divine purposes. The knowledge that defeat could mean death transformed every match into a profound test of courage, skill, and spiritual worthiness. Players competed not just for victory, but for the right to continue living, making every movement, every decision, every moment of play a matter of ultimate consequence. Understanding the stakes involved in the deadliest Maya bull games reveals the intensity of purpose that drove this ancient sport. You wouldn't just be playing a game, but participating in rituals where your very existence depended on your ability to channel divine favor through athletic performance. The Maya bull game served as a powerful tool for political maneuvering, diplomatic negotiation, and demonstration of authority throughout the Maya world. Rulers used bull game competitions to settle disputes, legitimize power, form alliances, and display their divine favor to subjects and enemies alike. Understanding the political dimensions of the game reveals how sports and statecraft intertwined in ways that would seem impossible in modern contexts. Intercity competitions provided alternatives to warfare for resolving conflicts between Maya polities. Instead of engaging in costly military campaigns that could devastate both sides, rulers might agree to settle disputes through bull game matches. The outcomes were considered divine judgments that both parties had to accept, making them more lasting than treaties imposed through force. Diplomatic marriages often included bull game celebrations as part of the wedding festivities. These tournaments allowed the families involved to display their athletic champions, demonstrate their wealth through elaborate ceremonies, and create bonds between their warrior classes. The shared experience of competition helped establish personal relationships that supported political alliances. Royal sons and daughters frequently participated in ballgame competitions as part of their preparation for leadership. These experiences taught them to handle pressure, make split-second decisions, and perform under the scrutiny of both human and divine audiences. Success in the ballgame could enhance a royal heir's legitimacy by proving their divine favour. Succession disputes sometimes included ballgame competitions as tests of worthiness for rule. When multiple claimants vied for thrones, their performance in ritual matches might be interpreted as signs of divine preference. A prince who excelled at the sacred game could use this achievement to bolster claims to leadership. Tribute and trade negotiations incorporated ballgame elements through tournaments that brought together representatives from multiple polities. These events provided neutral ground for conducting business while entertaining attendees and demonstrating the wealth and power of hosting cities. Successful tournaments enhanced a ruler's prestige throughout the region. Military alliances were forged and tested through ballgame competitions between potential allies. Teams representing different cities could compete in symbolic battles that revealed their fighting effectiveness without actual bloodshed. The trust developed through shared participation in sacred games translated into confidence on real battlefields. Internal political control operated through ballgame patronage that bound elite families to ruling dynasties. Noble families that provided skilled players for royal teams received privileges, protection, and access to resources. This system created networks of obligation that supported political stability. Population control mechanisms included ballgame spectacles that distracted subjects from political grievances while demonstrating royal power. Large-scale tournaments provided entertainment and religious fulfillment that satisfied public needs and reduced the likelihood of rebellion or unrest. Justice administration sometimes incorporated ballgame trials for serious offences. Accused individuals might be required to compete against champions representing the state or the aggrieved parties. Divine judgment expressed through athletic outcomes determined guilt or innocence in cases where human justice seemed inadequate. Economic competition between cities expressed itself through investment in ballgame infrastructure and player development. Cities with superior courts and teams attracted visitors, traders, and prestige that translated into political influence. The arms race for ballgame supremacy drove architectural innovation and artistic achievement. Religious legitimacy derived from successful ballgame programs that demonstrated rulers' ability to maintain proper relationships with divine forces. Kings who consistently fielded winning teams or hosted successful tournaments could point to these achievements as evidence of their spiritual worthiness to rule. International diplomacy extended Maya ballgame influence beyond traditional cultural boundaries. Archaeological evidence suggests that ballgame-like competitions spread to cultures throughout Mesoamerica, creating shared traditions that facilitated communication between diverse peoples. Propaganda purposes were served through ballgame imagery, incorporated into public art architecture and ceremonial objects. Rulers commissioned sculptures, murals, and reliefs depicting their athletic achievements or showing themselves in the costumes of legendary ball players. These visual statements reinforce political messages throughout their territories. Rebellion and resistance sometimes incorporated ballgame symbolism when subject populations challenged their rulers. Unauthorized games or competitions that violated official protocols could represent acts of defiance that asserted local autonomy against central authority. Colonial adaptation occurred after Spanish conquest as Maya communities found ways to continue ballgame traditions despite European disapproval. These underground continuations served political functions by maintaining cultural identity and social structures that supported resistance to colonial control. The interconnection of ballgame success and political power meant that athletic failure could have severe consequences for rulers' legitimacy. Kings whose teams consistently lost might face challenges to their authority on the grounds that they had lost divine favour. This created enormous pressure to maintain competitive programs regardless of cost. Understanding the political dimensions of Maya ballgame reveals that you wouldn't just be playing sports, but participating in a complex system where athletic performance directly influenced governance, diplomacy, and power relationships. Every game was simultaneously entertainment, religious ritual, and political theatre, with consequences that extended far beyond individual achievement. The Maya ballgame didn't disappear with the Spanish conquest, but adapted, transformed, and persisted in various forms throughout Central America and Mexico. Understanding these continuations helps reveal the profound cultural importance of the original game, while demonstrating how sporting traditions can survive even devastating social upheavals. Colonial authorities attempted to suppress ball game activities as part of their broader campaign against indigenous religious practices. Spanish priests recognized that the game retained powerful spiritual significance for Maya communities and represented a form of resistance to Christian conversion. However, the deep cultural roots of ball game tradition made complete elimination impossible. Underground continuation occurred as Maya communities moved their games to remote locations away from Spanish oversight. These hidden competitions maintained traditional rules, rituals, and meanings while adapting to new circumstances that required absolute secrecy. Players risked severe punishment if discovered by colonial authorities. Syncretistic adaptations emerged as indigenous communities found ways to blend ball game elements with approved Christian practices. Some regions incorporated ball game symbolism into Christmas celebrations or Saints' Day festivals, disguising ancient rituals within acceptable colonial frameworks. Modern survivals of ball game traditions exist today in various forms throughout Mesoamerica. Hit ball games played in western Mexico retain clear connections to ancient practices, while other regions maintain ceremonial courts where occasional ritual matches occur. These modern versions provide direct links to pre-Columbian sporting culture. Archaeological reconstruction efforts have attempted to understand and recreate ancient ball game practices based on court remains, artistic depictions, and ethnographic studies of surviving traditions. These scientific endeavors have revealed much about original rules, equipment, and cultural significance, while raising questions about the accuracy of modern interpretations. Cultural revival movements among contemporary Maya communities include attempts to restore ball game traditions as expressions of indigenous identity and resistance to cultural assimilation. These efforts face challenges in reconstructing practices that were deliberately obscured during centuries of suppression. Educational programs at museums and archaeological sites use ball game recreations to teach about Maya civilization and its achievements. These public demonstrations, while simplified for modern audiences, help maintain awareness of indigenous sporting traditions and their cultural significance. International recognition of the Maya ball game as an important cultural heritage has supported preservation and research efforts. UNESCO and other organizations have acknowledged ball game sites as world treasures deserving protection and study. Academic research continues to reveal new aspects of ball game culture through archaeological excavation, iconographic analysis, and interdisciplinary studies that combine anthropological, historical, and sports science approaches. Each new discovery adds to our understanding of how deeply the game was integrated into Maya society. Artistic inspiration drawn from ball game themes appears in contemporary art, literature, and film created by both indigenous and non-indigenous artists. These modern interpretations help keep ball game symbolism alive in popular culture, while sometimes distorting its original meanings. Tourist developments at major Maya sites often include ball game courts among their attractions, though these presentations typically emphasize spectacular aspects rather than spiritual significance. The challenge lies in making ancient traditions accessible to modern visitors while respecting their sacred nature. Digital preservation efforts use advanced technology to document ball game courts artifacts and related cultural practices. Virtual reality reconstructions allow people worldwide to experience these sacred spaces in ways that would have been impossible for previous generations. Sports history studies increasingly recognize the Maya ball game as one of humanity's most significant athletic traditions, acknowledging its influence on sports development and its demonstration that competitive games can serve far more complex social functions than simple entertainment. Philosophical reflections on the ball game's integration of athletic, spiritual, and political elements offer insights for contemporary discussions about the role of sports in society. The Maya example demonstrates how games can embody deepest cultural values, while serving practical social needs. The legacy of the Maya ball game challenges modern assumptions about the separation between secular and sacred activities, individual and community achievement, and entertainment and religious practice. This ancient tradition suggests possibilities for sports that engage whole human beings rather than just their physical abilities. Living with awareness of Maya ball game history means recognizing that sports can be far more than leisure activities or commercial enterprises. They can embody spiritual beliefs, political principles, and cultural values in ways that transform participants and spectators alike. The echoes of the sacred game continue to resonate through time, reminding us that human beings have always sought to connect physical excellence with spiritual transcendence, individual achievement with cosmic harmony, and temporal competition with eternal truth. In the bull courts of the ancient Maya, these connections weren't just possible, they were essential to maintaining the balance that kept the world turning. The perfection of a single gesture, masters of the Japanese tea ceremony. In a small room, barely large enough for 4 people to sit comfortably, an elderly Japanese man kneels in Caesar position, his spine perfectly straight despite his 70 years. Before him, a simple iron kettle simmers over glowing charcoal. With movements so precise they seem choreographed, yet so natural they appear effortless, he begins preparing tea in a ritual that will take the next hour to complete. Every gesture, every breath, every moment of silence has been refined through decades of practice to achieve a perfection that transcends the simple act of making tea. Welcome to the world of the Japanese tea ceremony, where the preparation and serving of tea becomes a spiritual discipline, requiring more dedication than most religious orders. This isn't about caffeine or social interaction. It's about achieving a state of consciousness where every movement becomes a meditation, every implement becomes sacred, and every gathering becomes a unique moment that will never be repeated in exactly the same way. Channel Yu, the Japanese tea ceremony, represents one of the most demanding and precise cultural practices ever developed. What appears to outsiders as an elaborate way to serve tea is actually a comprehensive spiritual discipline that synthesizes Zen Buddhism, Japanese aesthetics, and social philosophy into a unified artistic expression. The ceremony's foundation rests on 4 principles established by Sen no Rikyu, the 16th century tea master who codified much of modern tea practice, were harmony kei, respect sei purity, and jaku tranquility. These aren't just abstract ideals, but practical guidelines that govern every aspect of tea preparation, from the selection of implements to the arrangement of flowers to the manner of greeting guests. Learning the tea ceremony requires years of study before you can perform even the most basic service competently. The complexity isn't apparent to casual observers because the goal is to make extremely difficult procedures appear natural and effortless. Master practitioners spend decades perfecting movements that take only seconds to execute. The physical demands of tea ceremony practice are surprisingly challenging. Maintaining proper posture while kneeling on tatami mats for hours requires considerable strength and flexibility. Your knees and ankles must be conditioned to support extended sitting in Caesar position without discomfort that would distract from the spiritual aspects of the practice. Every movement in the tea ceremony follows prescribed forms that have been refined over centuries. How you pick up the tea scoop, the angle at which you hold the water ladle, the precise number of times you clean each implement. All these actions follow patterns that must be memorized until they become automatic responses. The seasonal awareness required for proper tea ceremony practice extends far beyond simply changing decorations. Temperature variations throughout the year require different charcoal arrangements, water temperatures, and timing adjustments. Summer procedures differ dramatically from winter ones, and spring tea service follows distinct patterns from autumn ceremonies. Equipment selection and care represent major responsibilities for tea practitioners. Each implement, tea bowls, scoops, whisks, water jars, requires specific maintenance procedures and proper storage. Many items are handcrafted by master artisans and cost enormous sums, making their care a serious responsibility. The aesthetic sense developed through tea study influences every aspect of a practitioner's life. Students learn to appreciate subtle variations in texture, color, and form that might escape untrained eyes. This heightened sensitivity extends beyond tea implements to architecture, gardening, clothing, and daily surroundings. Social protocols governing tea ceremony interactions are incredibly complex. Different procedures apply depending on the relative social status of participants, the occasion for the gathering, the season, and the level of formality appropriate to the setting. Knowing when to speak, what to say, and how to respond to different situations requires extensive experience. Cultural knowledge encompassing Japanese history, poetry, Buddhism, and artistic traditions forms an essential component of tea education. References to classical literature, seasonal observations, and philosophical concepts permeate tea-gathering conversations. Participants are expected to understand illusions and respond appropriately to subtle communications. The mental discipline required for tea ceremony mastery goes far beyond memorizing procedures. Students must develop mindfulness that allows them to remain fully present during each moment of the ceremony while simultaneously maintaining awareness of all participants' needs and feelings. Economic commitment to serious tea study can be substantial. Lessons from qualified teachers proper. Implements appropriate clothing and participation in formal tea gatherings all require significant financial investment. Many students take decades to acquire the equipment necessary for hosting their own ceremonies. Regional variations in tea ceremony practice exist throughout Japan, with different schools maintaining distinct traditions and emphases. Mastering any single school's approach requires full-time dedication, while understanding multiple schools' methods would take several lifetimes. The patience required for tea ceremony mastery tests modern sensibilities accustomed to rapid progress and instant gratification. Students might spend months learning to fold the fukusa silk cloth properly before moving on to more complex procedures. Each skill must be thoroughly internalized before advancing to the next level. Understanding the depth and complexity of tea ceremony, tradition reveals why authentic mastery takes decades to achieve, and why practitioners often continue studying well into their 80s and 90s. You wouldn't just be learning to make tea, you'd be dedicating your life to pursuing perfection in a discipline that demands everything you can give, while constantly revealing new depths to explore. The Japanese tea ceremony changes with the seasons in ways that reflect deep understanding of natural cycles, aesthetic sensitivity, and the Buddhist concept of mono, no aware, the bittersweet awareness of the transient nature of all things. Each season brings distinct procedures, implements decorations and spiritual emphases that transform the tea room into a microcosm of the natural world. Winter tea service called row centers around the hearth cut into the tatami floor, where charcoal burns to heat the water kettle. The guests gather closer to this source of warmth, creating an atmosphere of intimate community against the cold outside. Everything about winter tea emphasizes warmth, both physical and emotional. The deeper colors of tea bowls, the heartier sweets, the positioning of implements to capture and reflect heat. Preparing charcoal for winter service requires understanding combustion airflow and timing that takes years to master. The charcoal must be cut to specific sizes, arranged in precise patterns, and lit in ways that provide steady heat without producing smoke or unpleasant odors. Different types of wood create different burning characteristics that experienced practitioners can predict and control. Spring brings the furo season when the portable brazier replaces the sunken hearth. The ceremony literally opens up with implements arranged more spaciously and decorations emphasizing renewal and growth. Cherry blossoms, young bamboo shoots, and the pale green of early tea leaves influence color choices and aesthetic decisions. The transition between row and furo isn't merely a change of equipment, but a fundamental shift in the ceremony's character. Spring tea celebrates emergence from winter's introspection, but this celebration must be subtle, refined, never excessive. The joy is tempered by awareness that spring, like all seasons, will pass. Summer tea ceremony poses unique challenges as practitioners must create coolness and refreshment within formal structures that might seem stifling in hot weather. Water arrangements become more prominent with fresh sounds and visual coolness emphasized. The tea itself might be prepared with cooler water and timing is adjusted to prevent overheating in the tea room. Evening summer tea gatherings might extend later into the night when temperatures drop and the moon can be appreciated through carefully positioned windows. The interplay of interior and exterior spaces becomes particularly important as practitioners seek to capture cooling breezes while maintaining the ceremony's formal integrity. Autumn tea ceremony celebrates the peak of aesthetic refinement when nature displays its most brilliant colors before winter's approach. This is the season of greatest poignancy, when the beauty of maple leaves and chrysanthemums is enhanced by knowledge of their impermanence. Tea implements in warm browns and deep reds echo the natural palette. Harvest themes appear in autumn tea through the selection of sweets, flowers, and decorative objects that reference the abundance of the season, while acknowledging its temporary nature. The concept of mono no aware finds its fullest expression in autumn gatherings where beauty and sadness intertwine. New Year ceremonies represent the most formal and elaborate tea events of the annual cycle. These gatherings require perfect execution of the most demanding procedures, with implements and decorations chosen to express hopes for prosperity, health, and spiritual growth in the coming year. Seasonal flowers play crucial roles in creating appropriate atmospheres for tea gatherings. The selection, arrangement, and placement of flowers require deep knowledge of Japanese floral symbolism and aesthetic principles. A single flower poorly chosen or incorrectly displayed can disrupt the entire harmony of a ceremony. Weather conditions within each season influence specific choices about implements, procedures, and timing. A rainy spring day calls for different aesthetic decisions than a clear one, while winter snow creates opportunities for especially contemplative gatherings that emphasize the contrast between inner warmth and outer coldness. Clothing choices follow seasonal protocols that extend far beyond simple weather appropriateness. Colors, patterns, fabrics, and accessories all must align with the season while expressing each participant's understanding of aesthetic harmony and social appropriateness. Food and sweets served during tea gatherings reflect seasonal ingredients and traditional associations between flavors and times of year. Spring might bring delicate confections shaped like cherry blossoms, while autumn could feature sweets incorporating chestnuts or persimmons. The psychological impact of seasonal awareness in tea ceremony extends far beyond the ceremony itself. Regular practitioners develop heightened sensitivity to natural cycles that influences their daily perception of time, change, and beauty in ways that enrich their entire approach to living. Training in seasonal tea procedures requires at least one full year of study to experience each transition, but understanding the subtle variations within seasons can take decades to master. Some practitioners spend their entire careers perfecting their response to particular seasonal moments. Calendar calculations determine exact dates for seasonal transitions in tea practice, which might not align with astronomical or meteorological measures. These traditional dates preserve connections to historical practice while maintaining the ceremony's role as a bridge between human culture and natural rhythms. Regional variations in seasonal practice reflect Japan's climatic diversity, with northern and southern schools adapting basic principles to local conditions. However, the fundamental connection between tea ceremony and seasonal awareness remains constant throughout all authentic traditions. Understanding seasonal variations in tea ceremony reveals the practice's integration with the natural world and its role in helping participants remain connected to cycles that urbanization and modernization might otherwise obscure. Now, you wouldn't just be learning procedures, but developing a way of experiencing time itself as a series of unique, unrepeatable moments to be treasured for their distinctive beauty. The tea room, or chashitsu, represents one of the most refined architectural achievements in human history. A space designed to facilitate specific states of consciousness through careful manipulation of proportion light materials and spatial relationships. Every element of tea room design follows principles established over centuries to create environments where the ordinary world falls away and participants can achieve moments of perfect presence. The Nijohan tea room, measuring just 2 tatami mats, approximately 4 square meters, provides the standard for intimate tea gatherings. This seemingly cramped space actually represents ideal proportions for creating the awareness of closeness and shared experience essential to tea ceremony. Moving the walls outward by even inches would fundamentally alter the room's psychological impact. Entrance to the tea room typically occurs through a nijiraguchi, a small square opening requiring participants to crawl on hands and knees. This physically humble entry forces visitors to abandon ordinary social positions and enter the tea space in a posture of humility that prepares them psychologically for the equalities and intimacies of tea gathering. Proportional relationships within tea rooms follow mathematical ratios that create subtle harmonies affecting participants below the threshold of conscious awareness. These proportions derive from traditional Japanese architecture and refined specifically for tea use, establish spatial rhythms that promote calm and focused attention. Light management in authentic tea rooms avoids the harsh brilliance of modern illumination in favor of soft, filtered brightness that changes throughout the day. Shoji screens, paper windows, and carefully positioned openings create pools and shadows of light that enhance contemplation of tea. Implements, flower arrangements, and seasonal decorations. Material selection emphasizes natural substances that age gracefully and develop patina over time. Unstained wood clay plaster walls and tatami mat floors create environments that seem to breathe and respond to seasons while providing subtle textural variation that engages the senses without overwhelming them. Space utilization in tea rooms achieves maximum functionality within minimal dimensions through ingenious design solutions. Storage areas hide behind walls, implements appear when needed and disappear when not in use, and every square inch serves multiple purposes without creating a sense of crowding or inefficiency. Acoustic properties of tea rooms are carefully managed to enhance awareness of subtle sounds. The whisper of silk clothing, the soft placement of tea implements the gentle bubbling of water in the kettle. Harder materials like wood and clay reflect sound differently than soft materials like tatami and paper, creating complex acoustic environments. Integration with gardens occurs through controlled views and transitions that connect interior tea experiences with natural exterior settings. Windows might frame specific garden elements like stone lanterns or carefully pruned trees, while entryways transition gradually from outdoor to indoor space. Seasonal adaptability allows tea rooms to feel appropriate throughout the year, despite their small size and simple appointments. Subtle changes in decorations, implement arrangements, and even furniture configurations transform the space's character while maintaining its fundamental integrity. Privacy and enclosure in tea rooms create sanctuary from the external world while avoiding the oppressive feeling of confinement. This balance requires careful attention to sightlines, air circulation, and psychological factors that influence how people experience small spaces over extended periods. Furniture in tea rooms is minimal and often built into the architecture itself. Alcoves display seasonal decorations, built-in hearths provide heat and water heating capacity, and even seat positions are defined by the room's proportions rather than movable furniture. Maintenance of tea room architecture requires constant attention and periodic renewal. Tatami mats need regular replacement, paper screens require changing, and wood surfaces need appropriate care to preserve their appearance and function over years of use. Cultural symbolism embedded in tea room design reflects Zen Buddhist concepts, Japanese aesthetic principles, and tea ceremonies' philosophical foundations. Elements like asymmetrical arrangements, imperfect surfaces, and references to nature all communicate nonverbal messages about impermanence, humility, and the beauty of simplicity. Historical evolution of tea room architecture can be traced through examination of surviving structures and architectural drawings that show how tea masters refined spatial concepts over centuries. Each innovation solves specific problems while maintaining overall harmony with established principles. Construction techniques for tea rooms require specialized skills that few contemporary carpenters possess. Traditional joinery, precise proportional calculation, and understanding of how different materials interact represent knowledge that takes years to acquire and lifetimes to master. Regional variations in tea room design accommodate local climate conditions, available materials, and cultural preferences while maintaining essential spatial relationships. These variations demonstrate how universal principles can be adapted to specific circumstances without losing their fundamental character. Modern adaptations of tea room principles face challenges when incorporating contemporary amenities like electricity and heating, while preserving the essential qualities that make these spaces effective settings for tea ceremony. Successful adaptations require deep understanding of both traditional design principles and modern living requirements. Psychological effects of well-designed tea rooms include increased mindfulness, reduced anxiety, and enhanced appreciation for subtle beauty. Research has shown that people in tea room environments demonstrate measurable changes in brainwave patterns and stress hormone levels compared to more typical interiors. Understanding tea room architecture reveals how carefully designed physical environments can support specific human activities and states of consciousness. You wouldn't just be sitting in a small room, but experiencing space designed to heighten awareness, promote stillness, and create conditions where ordinary tea service becomes extraordinary spiritual practice. Every tool used in the Japanese tea ceremony carries history, meaning, and spiritual significance that transforms functional objects into sacred implements worthy of reverence. These items aren't merely utensils, but repositories of tradition, carriers of aesthetic philosophy, and focal points for meditation that connect each ceremony to centuries of tea culture. The tea bowl or shawan stands at the center of tea ceremony practice as both practical vessel and spiritual symbol. Master potters spend lifetimes perfecting the subtle qualities that make exceptional tea bowls. The way the rim feels against the lips, how the clay responds to hot tea, the visual and tactile pleasures created by glazes, form, and decorative elements. Regional styles of tea bowls reflect different aesthetic approaches and technical traditions. Rakuware, with its rough textures and dramatic glazes, embodies wabi-sabi principles of finding beauty in imperfection. Hagiware develops subtle color changes through use over time, creating unique histories in each bowl. Korean-style bowls bring foreign influences that enrich Japanese tea culture. The tea scoop, or chashaku, appears deceptively simple but requires enormous skill to create properly. Master tea practitioners often carve their own scoops from bamboo, spending hours shaping, sanding, and finishing each implement. The subtle curves that allow perfect measurement and transfer of powdered tea result from understanding gained through decades of experience. Seasonal variations in implements reflect the tea ceremony's connection to natural cycles and aesthetic sensitivity. Summer might call for glass tea bowls that appear cool and refreshing, while winter demands deeper, warmer-toned ceramics. These changes aren't arbitrary, but carefully considered choices that enhance each gathering's atmospheric appropriateness. The tea whisk, or chasen, demonstrates the remarkable craft skills of specialized artisans who split single pieces of bamboo into dozens of fine lines with knife-work of extraordinary precision. Different whisks create different froth textures in the tea, and experienced practitioners can detect subtle variations in whisk quality through use. Water jars, or mizusashi, serve functional purposes while contributing significantly to each gathering's aesthetic character. The selection of water containers involves considerations of size, material decoration, and seasonal appropriateness that require deep understanding of tea ceremony principles and artistic sensitivity. Kettle selection involves complex decisions about material size, shape, and sound characteristics. Iron kettles develop specific tones when water reaches proper temperature for tea preparation, and experienced practitioners can judge water readiness by listening to the kettle's voice. Some kettles are valued for their musical qualities as much as their functional performance. Textile implements like the fukusa silk cloth and shifuku storage bags represent areas where tea ceremony intersects with traditional Japanese textile arts. The folding, handling, and care of these items follow prescribed forms that require practice to execute gracefully while maintaining proper relationships between implements and participants. Storage and presentation of implements outside of active ceremony requires its own specialized knowledge. Many items are kept in wooden boxes, crafted specifically for individual pieces with inscriptions that document their provenance, previous owners, and historical significance. Authentication and valuation of tea implements involves expertise that takes decades to develop. Master appraisers can identify makers' dates and authenticity through examination of subtle details in glazes, tool marks, signatures, and aging patterns. The most prestigious pieces command prices equivalent to luxury automobiles or small houses. Care and maintenance of tea implements extends far beyond simple cleaning to include understanding how different materials respond to use, aging, and environmental conditions. Some pieces become more beautiful through use, while others require careful protection to preserve their qualities over time. Collection and inheritance patterns for tea implements create lineages that connect modern practitioners to historical traditions. Important pieces pass through generations of tea families, carrying stories and spiritual energy accumulated through centuries of ceremonial use. Copying and imitation in tea implement creation raise questions about authenticity, value, and cultural transmission. While master craftsmen often learn by copying historical pieces, the distinction between learning exercise and fraudulent reproduction requires ethical and aesthetic discrimination. Innovation in contemporary tea implement design challenges creators to honor tradition while responding to modern sensibilities and technical possibilities. Successful innovations demonstrate how ancient forms can evolve without losing their essential spiritual and aesthetic functions. Symbolic meaning embedded in implement designs connects tea ceremony to broader cultural and spiritual traditions. Dragons, phoenixes, seasonal motifs, and calligraphic inscriptions all carry meanings that enrich the ceremony's intellectual and emotional dimensions. Economic factors influence implement selection as tea practitioners balance aesthetic ideals with practical budgets. While the most exquisite pieces can cost fortunes, respectful tea ceremony can be practiced with modest implements chosen and cared for with devotion. The spirit brought to the implements matters more than their monetary value. Geographical variations in implement styles reflect regional aesthetic preferences, available materials, and local craft traditions. Kyoto pieces often emphasize refined elegance, while rural areas might produce implements celebrating rustic naturalness. Understanding these regional characteristics helps practitioners appreciate the diversity within tea culture. Educational aspects of implement study involve learning to see, touch, and understand objects with sensitivity that most people never develop. Students learn to detect subtle variations in texture, balance, and proportion that reveal the skill of their makers and enhance their function in ceremony. Emotional connections develop between practitioners and their implements through years of shared use in meaningful ceremonies. A tea bowl might carry memories of special gatherings, important teachers, or significant moments in a student's development. These personal associations transform functional objects into treasured companions. Spiritual dimensions of implement relationships extend beyond mere sentiment to encompass beliefs about objects absorbing and transmitting spiritual energy. Many practitioners believe that well-used implements develop spiritual presence that enhances subsequent ceremonies, creating feedback loops between objects and practice. Conservation challenges facing historical tea implements include environmental threats, damage from use or handling, and the loss of traditional maintenance skills. Museums and collectors work to preserve important pieces while balancing preservation needs with the implement's intended function in active ceremony. Collaborative relationships between tea masters and craftsmen create ongoing traditions where artistic vision and practical experience inform each other. These partnerships ensure that new implements meet the exacting standards required for serious tea practice, while allowing for creative evolution within traditional forms. Teaching through implements provides concrete ways to transmit abstract tea ceremony principles. Students learn proper attitudes through careful handling of precious objects, develop aesthetic appreciation through exposure to masterworks, and understand humility through responsibility for instruments greater than themselves. Technological impacts on implement creation include both opportunities for precision manufacturing and concerns about losing handcraft traditions that embody irreplaceable human sensitivity. The challenge lies in determining which aspects of traditional making processes are essential to preserve and which can be adapted to contemporary methods. Understanding the role of implements in tea ceremony reveals how objects can become vehicles for spiritual practice, carriers of cultural memory, and focal points for aesthetic appreciation. You wouldn't just be using tools, but engaging with artifacts that connect individual practice to generations of tea masters who found profound meaning in the simple act of sharing tea with others. The pursuit of tea ceremony mastery in Japan carries financial implications that extend far beyond occasional lessons and modest equipment purchases. Serious dedication to this art form represents a lifetime economic commitment that shapes practitioners' career choices, living arrangements, and family planning in ways that would challenge most modern people's assumptions about leisure activities. Initial tea study costs include registration fees for schools, monthly lesson charges, seasonal workshops, and special event participation fees. These ongoing expenses can easily consume the equivalent of a small income before students even begin acquiring personal implements or hosting gatherings. Many tea schools require students to advance through prescribed levels, each carrying additional costs. Equipment acquisition represents perhaps the most daunting financial challenge facing tea students. A complete set of basic implements for hosting simple gatherings might cost the equivalent of a new automobile, while master-quality pieces command prices that would strain the resources of wealthy families. Some students spend decades gradually assembling proper equipment collections. Kimono, appropriate for tea ceremony participation. Add another major expense category. Different seasons, formality levels, and ceremonial roles require specific garments that must be purchased, tailored, and maintained according to exacting standards. The costs include not just the kimono themselves, but also the numerous undergarments, accessories, and seasonal variations required for complete appropriateness. Tea room construction or rental creates additional financial burdens for practitioners who advance to hosting their own gatherings. Building an authentic tea room requires specialized craftsmen whose skills command premium prices, while the ongoing maintenance of traditional materials and architectural elements demands regular investment. Transportation and accommodation costs accumulate as serious students travel to study, with different masters attend important tea events and participate in seasonal celebrations at various locations. These activities are considered essential for deepening understanding, but require financial resources that many students struggle to maintain. Time investment calculations reveal the hidden economic impact of tea ceremony dedication. The hours spent in lessons practice, preparation, and ceremony participation represent opportunity costs in terms of career advancement and income generation. Many practitioners must choose between professional success and tea study dedication. Social obligations associated with tea ceremony participation include gift-giving customs, reciprocal entertaining expectations, and contributions to school activities that create ongoing financial responsibilities. These obligations bind tea communities together, but constrain individual budgets considerably. Professional opportunities within tea culture exist for exceptional practitioners who become teachers, performers, or implement dealers. However, these careers typically require decades of unpaid study before generating income, and even successful tea professionals usually earn modest livings compared to conventional professions. Insurance and storage costs for valuable tea implements require careful consideration as collections grow. Many pieces require climate-controlled environments, security systems, and specialized coverage that add to the total cost of ownership beyond initial purchase prices. International study opportunities attract serious practitioners who travel to Japan for intensive training or cultural immersion. These experiences provide incomparable learning opportunities, but involve travel accommodation, lesson, and living expenses that can consume years of savings. Family impact of tea ceremony. Dedication affects not just individual practitioners, but their spouses and children who must accommodate reduced household incomes, altered social calendars, and homes arranged around tea practice requirements. Some families embrace tea culture entirely, while others struggle with these competing demands. Economic accessibility varies greatly between different tea schools and regions, with some traditions emphasizing democratic participation, while others maintain exclusivity through high costs. This tension between tea ceremonies' spiritual ideals of equality and the practical realities of economic barriers creates ongoing debates within tea communities. Scholarship and support systems exist within established tea organizations to help talented students continue their studies despite financial limitations. These programs recognize that economic barriers should not prevent worthy practitioners from advancing in tea study, though funding is often insufficient to meet demand. Investment potential in tea implements attracts some participants who view collection building as alternative asset accumulation. While exceptional pieces can appreciate significantly over time, treating tea implements primarily as investments contradicts the spiritual values central to authentic practice. Modern workplace integration of tea principles creates opportunities for professionals to find economic value in tea training through improved client relationships, cultural sensitivity, and personal networking within Japanese business communities. Some practitioners successfully combine traditional tea study with contemporary career advancement. Cost-benefit analysis of tea ceremony, participation challenges, Western economic thinking by proposing benefits that can't be easily quantified, spiritual development, aesthetic appreciation, cultural connection, and community membership. These intangible returns may justify financial sacrifices that seem irrational from purely economic perspectives. Economic sustainability of tea culture depends on maintaining accessible entry points for new students while preserving quality standards that require significant investment. Schools and teachers must balance financial viability with cultural preservation in ways that ensure transmission to future generations. Value systems inherent in tea ceremony challenge conventional measures of worth by prioritizing spiritual and aesthetic achievement over material accumulation. This philosophy can either conflict with or complement modern economic pressures, depending on individual practitioners' ability to integrate different value frameworks. Understanding the economic realities of tea ceremony practice reveals why serious dedication requires lifestyle choices that most people would find incompatible with contemporary financial priorities. You wouldn't just be investing money in lessons, but reorganizing your entire economic life around values that place spiritual and aesthetic development above material convenience and conventional success. The highest levels of tea ceremony mastery come with a form of isolation that few outsiders understand. Master practitioners often find themselves separated by their knowledge and sensitivity from daily life, living with awareness of beauty and meaning that can't be shared with those who haven't undergone similar training. This solitude isn't chosen, but emerges naturally, as one develops perceptions that have no common vocabulary. Advanced tea masters see differently than ordinary people, noticing subtle variations in color texture, proportional relationships, and seasonal changes that escape untrained observation. This heightened sensitivity enhances every experience, but also creates frustration when trying to communicate these perceptions to others who lack the vocabulary or experience to understand. The precision required for master-level tea performance creates internal standards that apply to all activities, not just formal ceremony. Daily actions like arranging flowers, folding clothes, or serving food become subject to aesthetic criteria that most people would find unnecessarily demanding. This attention to detail can alienate friends and family who don't share the same values. Seasonal awareness developed through decades of tea practice makes masters acutely conscious of natural cycles and environmental changes that others miss completely. While this sensitivity enriches their experience of the world, it also creates sadness at humanity's general disconnection from nature and impatience with people who remain oblivious to seasonal beauty. Cultural knowledge accumulated through tea study encompasses vast areas of Japanese history, poetry, Buddhism, aesthetics, and crafts that have little relevance in contemporary conversation. Masters carry encyclopedic understanding of topics that interest almost no one outside tea circles, creating intellectual isolation even among educated people. Teaching responsibilities require masters to constantly adapt their communication to students at various levels of understanding, while suppressing frustration at repetitive questions and basic errors. The patience required for effective teaching can exhaust masters who would prefer to practice and develop their own understanding rather than constantly explaining fundamentals. Standards of excellence developed through master-level training make it difficult to accept mediocrity in any context. Whether evaluating tea implements, architectural spaces, or human behavior, masters apply criteria that most people would find impossibly demanding. This creates challenges in family relationships, work environments, and casual social interactions. Economic pressures affect masters differently than beginning students, because their reputations and expertise create both opportunities and obligations. While masters might earn income through teaching or demonstration, they also face expectations to maintain expensive lifestyles that reflect their status within tea culture. Health considerations become increasingly important as masters age and must adapt their practice to physical limitations. Years of kneeling in Caesar position can create joint problems, while the mental intensity of tea practice can require conscious efforts to maintain balance with rest and relaxation. Spiritual development through tea often leads masters toward deeper engagement with Buddhist philosophy and meditation practice. This spiritual evolution can create distance from family members and friends who don't share these interests or who view religious development with suspicion or discomfort. Innovation versus tradition creates ongoing tension for masters who understand both the value of preserving established forms and the need for tea culture to remain vital and relevant. Balancing these competing demands requires wisdom that few possess and decisions that often satisfy no one completely. Relationships with other masters involve complex dynamics of respect, competition, and collaboration that outsiders rarely understand. While masters share common dedication to tea, their different teaching approaches, aesthetic preferences, and philosophical interpretations can create subtle conflicts and alliances. Public responsibilities include representing tea culture to media, tourists, and cultural organizations in ways that communicate its essence without trivializing its depth. Masters must translate complex spiritual and aesthetic concepts into language accessible to general audiences while maintaining authentic understanding. International recognition brings opportunities to teach abroad and share Japanese tea culture with global audiences, but it also creates concerns about misrepresentation and commercial exploitation of traditions that masters have spent their lives protecting and developing. Legacy concerns motivate aging masters to ensure proper transmission of their knowledge to qualified students who will maintain tea traditions authentically. Choosing worthy successors and preparing them adequately represents one of the most important and difficult responsibilities masters face. Personal practice continues to evolve even at the master level as ongoing study reveals new depths in familiar procedures. Many masters report that their understanding continues developing well into their 80s and 90s, suggesting that tea mastery has no true endpoint. Community leadership roles often fall to masters by default, because their knowledge and dedication make them natural spokespersons for T-values. However, these responsibilities can conflict with personal practice and development goals, creating difficult choices about how to allocate limited time and energy. Modern world integration challenges masters to find ways to apply T principles in contemporary contexts while maintaining the integrity of traditional practice. This balancing act requires constant adjustment as society changes and new challenges emerge. Mortality awareness intensifies as masters realize their knowledge and skills will die with them unless successfully transmitted to others. The urgency of this transmission creates pressure that can overshadow personal satisfaction with achievement and advancement. Understanding the isolation that accompanies T-mastery reveals why this path attracts only those with exceptional dedication and philosophical sophistication. You wouldn't just be learning elaborate procedures, but accepting a way of life that separates you from mainstream society, while offering rewards that few people can appreciate or understand. The master's solitude is both the price and the privilege of pursuing perfection in a discipline that values depth over breadth, quality over quantity, and being over having. Finding True North. The evolution of navigation tools. Stand on the deck of a ship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from any land with nothing but water stretching to every horizon. The sun has set, stars are beginning to appear, and you need to determine exactly where you are and which direction will take you safely home. This challenge, knowing your position and direction in a seemingly featureless world, has driven some of humanity's most ingenious innovations and shaped the course of civilization itself. The story of navigation is the story of human exploration, trade warfare, and the relentless quest to know where we are in an uncertain world. From the first sailor who noticed that certain stars always pointed the same direction to the satellites that now pinpoint your location within feet. Navigation tools represent humanity's attempt to impose order on the chaos of the unknown. But understanding navigation history isn't just about admiring clever gadgets or scientific advancement. It's about recognizing how the ability to find our way shaped every aspect of human development, determining which civilizations thrived, which trade routes prospered, and which empires controlled the seas that connected the world. Long before humans created instruments to find their way, they learned to read the natural world itself as a vast navigation system. Early navigators developed skills that would seem almost supernatural to modern people, accustomed to GPS displays and digital maps. These ancient techniques required intimate knowledge of natural phenomena, perfect memory, and the ability to make life or death decisions based on subtle environmental cues. Star navigation represented the first systematic approach to finding direction over long distances. Different cultures developed sophisticated methods for using celestial bodies as guides, creating mental maps of the night sky that allowed them to navigate with remarkable precision. The North Star's fixed position made it invaluable to Northern Hemisphere sailors, while Southern navigators learned to use the Southern Cross and other stellar markers. Polynesian wayfinding techniques reached extraordinary levels of sophistication, allowing navigators to cross thousands of miles of open ocean to find tiny islands. These master navigators, called Palu, developed abilities that modern science is only beginning to understand. They could sense ocean swells reflecting off distant lands, read wave patterns to determine proximity to islands, and use bird flight patterns to identify the direction of land beyond the horizon. Wind patterns provided crucial navigation information for experienced sailors who learned to recognize seasonal changes, daily variations, and the effects of land masses on air movements. Trade winds, monsoons, and local wind systems became highways across the oceans for those who understood their patterns and timing. Cloud formations offered navigation clues to observant travelers. Clouds behave differently over land and water, with land masses creating updrafts that form distinctive cloud patterns visible from great distances. Skilled navigators could identify the presence of islands by cloud formations on the horizon, long before the land itself became visible. Watercolor and wave patterns revealed information about depth currents and proximity to land that experienced navigators used to supplement other navigation techniques. Different colored waters might indicate varying depths, river outflows, or underwater geography. Wave patterns changed when influenced by nearby land masses or underwater features. Animal behavior provided navigation assistance as different species had predictable relationships with land feeding areas and seasonal migration patterns. Seabirds typically flew towards land in the evening and away from it in the morning. Marine mammals might indicate the location of rich feeding areas associated with specific geographic features. Sound navigation used echoes, distant thunder, breaking waves, and other audio cues to gather information about surroundings. Experienced navigators could detect land by hearing waves break against distant shores or by noticing how sounds carried differently over water versus land. Smell and taste offered subtle navigation clues through changes in water salinity, the presence of organic materials washed from land, or distinctive odors carried by offshore winds. Some navigators claimed they could smell different islands based on their unique vegetation and geological characteristics. Sun position tracking provided basic directional information that all early navigators used, but master navigators developed sophisticated techniques for estimating time, latitude and even longitude based on careful observation of solar movements throughout the day and across seasons. Temperature and humidity changes often indicated proximity to land masses, fresh water sources, or different climate zones. These factors help navigators confirm their approximate position and adjust their courses accordingly. Ocean current awareness required understanding how major current systems operated and how they interacted with seasonal changes, weather patterns, and geographic features. Navigators learned to use currents to their advantage while avoiding areas where adverse currents would impede progress. Memory techniques developed by traditional navigators were extraordinary, involving complex mental maps, song cycles, and story traditions that preserved navigation knowledge across generations. Polynesian navigators memorized stick charts representing wave patterns and island locations, while other cultures used epic poems and stories to encode geographic information. Training methods for traditional navigation required years of apprenticeship under master navigators who gradually revealed the secrets of reading natural signs. Students learned through direct observation, practical experience, and memorization of vast amounts of environmental knowledge. Cultural integration of navigation knowledge meant that entire societies developed around understanding natural navigation techniques. These skills weren't specialized knowledge, but part of general education that enabled communities to thrive in island environments or nomadic lifestyles. Limitations of natural navigation included vulnerability to weather conditions that obscured celestial or environmental cues, the difficulty of determining precise position, and the enormous amount of knowledge required to navigate successfully over long distances. These limitations eventually drove the development of artificial navigation instruments. Understanding how humans navigated before instruments reveals the extraordinary observational skills our ancestors developed and the intimate relationship they maintained with natural environment. These traditional techniques represent